Ladies and gents, welcome back. It's great to be back here on another Fridays. These Fridays, it keeps coming so much quicker every week. These weeks are flying by, and unfortunate for that. My kids are going back to school this week coming, and well, it seems like this is the end of summer. Well, this is the end of the summer holidays anyway. Maybe not the end of summer. Summer stretches on well through September here in British Columbia. So looking forward to more nice weather as it comes. It's been a kind of a cool summer. Most of us have noticed it, except for maybe the crazy liberals. They seem to think that we're in Hades. It hasn't been, not at all. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the chat. Everybody, come on in here. Why don't we get the chat up? Oh. Yeah, that's right. There it is. There it is. I saw somebody mentioning in there earlier saying, where are you from? I think it's right there, right there. Where are you from? Let's see, from coast to coast. Everybody put your town in there in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from, because we've got people from all over the place, not just in Canada, also in other parts of the planet. Maybe America. Maybe Europe. We don't know. Everybody's from all over the place. So put your town in the chat. We'll see where everybody is hailing from tonight. And welcome everybody. While you're at it and you're typing in the chat, make sure to go over and hit that like button. It helps out a whole ton. It helps out a lot, actually. So get over there. It's free. It's easy. You just hit that like button, and it really helps with the algorithmic goodness. It tells the algorithm that, hey, you know, people in your demographic like what you're seeing here, so why don't we share this along for other people in that same demographic? And hey, check it out. They're right there on YouTube as we speak. We're probably going to go up there and recommend it right alongside of the next video that they're watching. That's how this stuff works, and I really appreciate it when everybody does that. It helps out so much. It helps out tremendously, and it's easy to do. Clickety clack. Have a good time with that. Howdy, Clyde, straight out of Toronto. Oh, okay. You guys apparently getting some new taxes on the way. Ooh, mercy. That's coming at your new mayor. The one that, Ben Bankus makes fun of her accent. I think she just sounds drunk all the time. To be honest, what is she on? She's just completely drunk. I think maybe I'll pop that up here. There's got to be a clip. I saw a clip of her today. Let's just type in Toronto. Toronto, and she should pop up real quick. Toronto. Nope. Of course not. Not immediately. But yeah, some new taxes coming down the pipe for Torontonians, and that's never a good thing, is it? Well, we've got enough taxes as the liberals have been putting and installing on us. Yeah, tax us, tax me harder, daddy, is the the way of the liberals here. They got gas tax hikes. Oh God, everybody in Toronto is just suffering from this, and all over Canada. But what are we looking at here? We got budget chief Shelley Carroll says tax pitch. Can you afford to pay an extra $470 a year? Really? That's what's gonna be happening for those new gas taxes. Oh, really? As soon as I say it, she doesn't pop up. But I saw it earlier. It was all over the place. But yeah, she just I don't know if it's an accent. I think she's just drunk all the time. At least she sounds that way. That's how it sounds when she's talking. But that's it. They voted for it. Yeah, well, they did. They absolutely did. Holy cow. Feel very sorry for them over there in Toronto. But what about the rest of us? We didn't vote for that, especially in the West. Oh, God. Oh, golly. Well, I guess when it comes to provincial politics, we did vote for it. And I don't know if that's going to go the same way next time around with the next election here in British Columbia. But things are not faring so well for a lot of people in British Columbia. And we're going to get into that. Trudeau has to pay Papa Schwab. Yeah, the old Q-tip. Cotton Schwab needs a paycheck. You know, does nobody ever criticize him for never having run a business before. Yeah, well, yeah, valuetainment guy, Patrick Bet Davis. He definitely tore into him recently on one of his podcasts talking about that. Golly is a good word. Yeah, golly is a good word. I like that word. Good evening from Sarnia, Ontario. I've been to Sarnia. That's Chemical Valley, right? Chris Sky looking like a much better choice now. Yeah, well, I bet you a lot of people are probably kicking themselves over that. They're about to lose Dundas Street as well in Toronto. That doesn't sound like a very good plan. Maybe we'll get a lot of people moving out west. I don't know. It's not that much cheaper out here. Seriously, Clyde blocking words? Why? I'm not blocking any words. Am I blocking words? Are any words not coming up? Yeah, let me know if something's not flying in the chat, because I don't know if that's a YouTube thing. I know I'm not blocking any words. Looks like the majority here are from Sarnia. We got a big Sarnia crew going on. No, it's Clyde, 24% of Canada greenhouse gases. Woohoo! Unacceptable Fringe with a $6.99 super chat. Thank you so much, Derek. We are the change, Clyde. Join me and run for mayor. We will bring the world to their knees. Have a great stream. What am I going to run for? Mayor of a little town in British Columbia? I don't think I'm going to be much use at that, but thanks for the super chat. G Meister also, thank you for the $5 super chat. So we're being told grocery shop at Dollarama now. How long until what is that? QWEW looking for sales on bugs. Yeah, well, yeah, they're gonna start selling crickets at the Dollarama now. Just waiting for my Clyde shirt. Trish, oh, thanks for going over there to the merch shop. Now this is a thing. Like, a lot of people asked for this, and or Anu, what is this? You can't say AS. Oh, that, and you can't say ain't. It gets blocked. Oh, that's weird. I'm not doing that. I'm not blocking it. That must be a YouTube thing. I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah, I'll have to look into that, because I'm not actively blocking anything. And in fact, even my chat, like, there's bots and stuff in my chat, and I let everything go, because as soon as you put any sort of limits on what's in the chat, it limits the people who are talking. And so I do whatever I can to make sure everybody can talk in either the chat or in my comments on the channel. You don't see bots in the chat. You see bots in the comments. Sorry about that. Greetings from Almer, Clyde, or Aylmer. How do you pronounce that? I've never heard of that. I can check these things on other streams. Well, that's weird. I'm gonna look into that on the back end. Sorry if that's something that, you never know. They turn something on when it becomes a feature instead of giving you the option at that. But Trish jumping in there saying thanks for waiting for the shirt. And well, I'm glad people have enjoyed it. We've got the new merch shop is up, and it's been doing pretty well. So if anybody wants to get over there and jump on that and get some of this sweet merch. Now, for people that have been paying attention to the show, I put this off for a really long time. I wanted to make sure that there was like really good quality products being sold on the shop. I got this zip up hoodie that Tamara Leach was so nice enough to model off for me. I actually gave it to her. It was the first one. It just happened to come out, right? It came to me when she was visiting, so it was perfect timing. But the zip up hoodie, comfortable. I noticed I normally wear a large hoodie, and it is like my size is a large. So if you're a big feller, you probably want to go with an extra large or even bigger. But just as a heads up, I couldn't find a sizing chart. I'll work on the store better, and I'll get that stuff up for you. But also hats. With a few different design and ideas here, and also the Do Not Comply shirt. This one's a limited run, so get it before it's gone. I'm gonna have other designs that come up, and there'll be a nice, fun, revolving thing of limited design shirts, and you guys can get in on that stuff there. Construction Cronies with a $20 super chat. Thank you so much. Met Olivia Chow and that was her name, Olivia Chow, and Jack Layton. He was, rest in peace. He was awesome. She was really nice, but too far out for politics. I'm glad I moved to Edmonton in 05. It awakened me. People from Toronto just don't know. We live in a bubble there. Yeah, I lived in Toronto for a short time back in like 2000, and yeah, it is a bubble. It is a bubble. You're in your own little Toronto sphere, and that's it. And yeah, people don't look around the rest of the country and see what's going on. But yeah, Edmonton's a cesspool, says Taylor. Well, I don't know. It might be better than Toronto, at least the way things are going. Yeah, wow, unbelievable. But let's get into some of this stuff. Excuse me, I got the hiccups earlier today because I ate something really spicy, and it really, yeah, it clobbered me. So I got that, and then here I am. I'm getting the hiccups again. Yes, it's a cesspool. Let's get into this. Yes, Rumble, Clyde. Okay, so about Rumble, I was mirroring all my content, but there was nobody was watching. Well, there was a few people watching it over there, but it was never getting recommended on Rumble. So I just stopped the constant feed to Rumble. They can approach me if they wanna chat about bringing the show back over there. That is a thing. Construction Cronies, thanks for joining with the membership. I really appreciate that. That's great. Yeah, I discontinued the Rumble thing for now. It's kind of on hold. I didn't delete the Rumble or anything like that, but it's just they're not recommending. They're not putting the content out there at all. So we'll see what happens with Rumble. I think it's a good shot at a viable alternative to other places. YouTube has treated me quite well. I know there's all the things you got to dance around here, but YouTube definitely recommends this channel out to so many people. It puts it out there, gets more eyeballs on it. Putting it on Rumble, it didn't really do that. So keep the Rumble mirroring. Use it as an archive if you decide if YouTube decides to cancel you, Clyde. Yeah, I do the mirroring stuff, so I've got that going. But you got to entice. If you're not getting any attention somewhere, you got to entice the attention over your way. But you want to leave YouTube, Haley's mom. Yeah, I don't want to leave YouTube. I think YouTube has its problems, but it is where the mainstream is, and I don't think I'm gonna get banned at all. I don't think that's a thing. I don't really, and I mean I push the limits in so much as like sometimes my things get demonetized and sometimes the videos get the 18 plus age gated. That happens, but for the most part, YouTube's really been very good to me and this channel, and I'd be lying to say that they weren't good. So that's a thing. I know a lot of people have moved over to Rumble because they got sweet deals going over to Rumble. So that is a thing as well. Michael McLean with the $5 super chat. Thank you so much. I've had to grocery shop at Dollarama for the past 6 months. Some decent recipes can be made if you're creative for $3 to $10. What was that? Catch the check to check life. Oh, that check to check life. Yeah, that check to check life. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I wasn't in my video. I'm criticizing the fact that the media is heralding people going to the Dollarama for their groceries. I mean, you don't consider Dollarama like a grocery place. You consider it just kind of like a, if anything, get a bag of chips sort of place. But maybe they are marketing towards moving into the grocery stuff. But this is why I went into a larger part of why the carbon tax is a food tax at the end of the day. No ifs, ands, or buts about that, and we'll get in there with this live stream for sure. Chippy's Outdoors with a $20 super chat. Good evening, y'all, from Methatoba. Methatoba, that's what they're calling it now. Yikes. That stuff is getting everywhere, is it not? Yikes. We need to clean up our streets, man. What have they done to our country? Is such a number on our country. Also, later today, we have Jeff Evely on the show. I had him on this morning on the video, but so I filmed that last night, and we got into a chat about this generational theory that he was telling me about, and I was so absolutely enthralled by it that I invited him back to come in and talk about this this generational theory, because it really was blowing my mind. And I said, you know what, stop where you're at and let's do this live for everybody to hear this conversation, because I think, wow, everybody needs to hear this. So later in the show, Jeff Evely from V for F, Veterans for Freedom, will be coming on to explain to me about this generational theory. So I really say hang on to your seats, grab some popcorn. This is going to be a gooder. It sure is. Jeff is no boomer. Yeah, Jeff is no boomer. No. I think he's millennial. I think isn't that his age group, millennial? Or I don't think he's Gen X, or maybe, I don't know. Well, I'll have to ask him when he comes on the show. But let's get into some of this stuff, because here's some of this stuff that's coming our way, and the younger generation is saying no, not gonna play that game. Homie, don't play that sort of thing. So I wanted to share this clip, because this is a great one. This is the anti-Greta. This is English girl. 12-year-old girl destroys the concept of 15-minute cities. Let's just get into it.
If, for example, I went to my friend's house in Zone 3, my parents normally come and pick me up in their car. It only takes 10 minutes. So does that mean that they would have to go round the ring road and back into town again? If my mum or dad had to drive round the ring road, it would take 30 minutes, causing much more pollution and leaving a much bigger carbon footprint. They will say, you can walk home. Would that be safe for me to walk home? Me as a 12-year-old walking home in the dark alone. Is that really going to be safe? Then they will say, oh, don't worry about that. We've already thought of that. You'll be safe. We will have 1,000 cameras on the streets following you and tracking you all the way home.
Oh, that sounds ideal.
Just remember, it's for your safety.
Oh, it's always for your safety.
What? Are you serious? Do you really think I want to be watched every second of the day? Are you serious? Thousands of cameras tracking my every move until I get home. At this point, I have to ask, is my safety that important to me that I want to be followed by cameras all the way home? Or do I prefer to have freedom than privacy? For your information, I still wouldn't feel safe. No amount of cameras is going to stop someone who wants to attack me. I want to be safe, but not to the extent that I am prepared to give up my freedom and my privacy to have it. As a 12-year-old, I am really concerned about my future. And to Klaus Schwab, I say this. How dare you!
That's great.
How dare you steal my childhood and my future, and the future of all children by enslaving us in your crazy digital surveillance prison. We all know where this is leading. These are the first steps of a dystopian reality called 15-minute neighborhoods. From a small seed, a huge tree can grow. Climate change is being used to control us, to nudge us in the direction the greedy people want us to go. The truth is that the greedy people want total control over everything we do, everything we think, and everything we say. Our government has been hijacked by greedy and selfish imposters posing as politicians. They believe they are better than us and masters over us. And until this problem is effectively dealt with, the tyranny will continue.
Unbelievable, kid. She's the anti-Greta, and it's amazing. I'd love to find out who this kid is actually, but she's out there and she's speaking, and she's saying all the just nailing people with truth bombs on this one here. I don't know how I missed this. Base Greta Thunberg Jasmine destroying the 15-minute surveillance scheme from Klaus Schwab, the grand Q-tip of the World Economic Forum. That's unreal. I love seeing this stuff. And it's amazing when you have kids that have learned the reality of the situation and they're not falling for it. They're not falling for any of this stuff. We have had some strides here in Canada as well. Some good things have happened in the recent times here. We got this from Carl Harrison on Twitter saying, Alberta Crown issues acquittals in all public health order cases, may refund COVID-19 fine ticket fines. So any of the fines, they may actually even refund people who paid them. Hopefully this infuriates that. And I'm going to get into that guy. But yeah, this is from the Epoch Times. Alberta Crown issues, you to not read the article, unfortunately. But the Alberta Crown issues acquittals on all public health order cases. And they might actually refund people in Alberta. And hopefully, we see that going across other provinces as well. I know in British Columbia, there was just this massive thing of people just blatantly just, not going to do it. They'd collect the tickets, they'd crumple them up and throw them in the trash. And that was the biggest thing for them, was enforcing the tickets, like begging people to come on, please come pay your tickets. And yeah, that's just the way it was going here in British Columbia. Anyway, but good news, as always, we take the good news. But who's being mentioned in this? This is the Charlie Angus NDP. What do we call him? He's our ass hat of the day and of the year, probably. This is I didn't even know this guy existed. I didn't know this type of vitriol. It was. I mean, we saw bots and people on the internet behaving like this. This is actual sitting MP for the NDP government, and this is him. This Dan Fournier pointing out, parasite politician Charlie Angus wishes death upon Canadians. Canadian politician is okay that people with immunity against SARS-CoV-2 are being denied transplants. This was, of course, talking about the late Sheila Lewis, who subsequently died from her illness as she was denied a transplant. And then, eventually the public outcry from the public came out and said, no, you got to change your ways. Alberta Health Services reversed their decision, but it was actually too late for her. This fool had this to say: a woman died because she preferred to fight for disinformation, anti-vax BS, and conspiracy. Pierre Poilievre says she is a hero and supports a candidate so bogus that Doug Ford kicked him out. Now he's referring to Baber, in that Roman Baber. Can't believe this guy actually had that to say. In my books, dirt, absolute dirt. This guy, if you're in the Timmins region, if you know people in the Timmins region, reach out to them. Make sure this guy is famous for this line. Make sure everybody knows that this is what his opinion was and this is what he has to say. And let that be his election calling when his election comes up. Make sure we make this guy famous for this. This is the most vile thing I can imagine someone saying in this case. And just to be clear, Sheila Lewis had antibodies. She was tested. That's why she didn't go get vaccinated. That's why. So another Substack article, and this one from Dr. Sorry, I'm going to mispronounce this, but Dr. Briam W. Brittle, he wrote this article saying, Canadian politician is okay that people with immunity against SARS-CoV-2 are being denied transplants. And there's a whole article here. I'd love to, I'm going to put it right in the chat for everybody right now. If you're watching this after the fact, the live chat replay is actually right there off to the side. And you can see the live chat replay as people were chatting during the live stream. The link will be right there. Check it out. Read that article. Put it on, bookmark it for later. check it out, and have a good read. If you subscribe to people on Substack, that is this is another good one to subscribe to. But just unbelievable, disgusting behavior here from a sitting politician in Canada. I'm going to close some tabs because my computer is suffering. It is just going, Clyde, close the Chrome tabs. What are you doing? Close them. I can't handle it. Can't do it. But I wanted to do a little bit of a promo here. Simon Hergott, some people in the chat know who he is. Some people have even told me, you got to get him on the show. I was talking with him to get him on the show, just not working out with the logistics of his situation right now. He's on the road and he's doing a lot of this stuff, filming documentaries. But this is, I'm going to show this clip. This is from his new documentary called Stolen Water, the waging war on water rights and BC food security. And this is really bad considering what we're getting into. We're going to be talking about the economy. We're going to be talking about extra taxes. We're going to be talking about affordability crisis. And this is what the government is doing. They're restricting farmers' ability to use water that's available. It's not, we're talking about aquifers. We're not talking about drying up the rivers. And it's all in the name of climate change, mitigating climate change. Again, for people who are watching the chat and watching the replay, look at the chat replay. The link will be in the chat at this given time. So check out this documentary. I'm going to show a short clip of it here.
We farm about 750 acres in the valley. We've been here for over 30 years doing the hay thing. I grew up on a large ranch in the valley. I've been here all my life. We got letters through the summer where we were to cut back 50%, or 30% was the first one, then it was 50%. And we all complied to that. It was a voluntary cutback. And then all of a sudden they just come with their notices saying, that's it, no more water, you can't water anymore. Well, we had just taken our second cut off and we need that water. Especially as soon as we take a crop of hay off, the water has to go on to get the regrowth coming. They gave us no notice whatsoever for that. They could have said 2 weeks, you're gonna have to shut your water off. It would have gave us time to keep on going. And then, so a lot of us went ahead and we watered anyway, because this is our living. Like, you know, we could lose way over $100,000 by not getting that water on and getting a crop of hay. So it's really for us, it's that last crop of hay that makes the difference. The other two go to pay bills, basically. So the government comes along, they shut our water off, and then in the next couple of weeks, they're going to be beating their chest down in Victoria and saying, look what we did. You know, we saved the salmon. We shut off all those big bad farmers in Westwold, and the rivers jumped 4 inches. But little do people know that Mother Nature does what Mother Nature does. We're gonna get some rain, we're getting cooler nights. That river always jumps 4 inches this time of year. Mm-hmm. The salmon are gonna come up the river as soon as it comes up. They're not stupid. They'll sit in Shuswap Lake until the water levels are cool enough and high enough that they can come up and spawn. And it's been happening since the beginning of time, but all of a sudden now, we asked for a meeting, they wouldn't show up. There's no science in there. Like, we asked for the science behind their decisions to shut us down. They didn't even show up at the meeting to give us that science. I don't believe that there is any.
This is infuriating, and I want to encourage everyone to go watch this in its entirety. Again, I'm gonna put the link in the chat there so everybody can go see this and go give Simon some support. He's out there filming this stuff. He's getting out there and doing all of this. We need to support filmmakers that are doing such incredible work. If I find any, I don't know if he has a Patreon or anything like that. If I find out about that, I'll definitely be putting that on the channel and getting people to go over there and help out in any way that they can. That's for sure. So I wanted to put this plug out there. Get over there, watch it, share it out. Make sure everybody sees this, because it's these are important, very important topics for all Canadians to be looking at, because a lot of us are looking at this whole situation in Canada and they're picking on this group and they're picking on this group and they're picking on this group. What we all need to realize is they're picking on all of us. Every group is getting picked on at this point. It's just they've separated us so well that we're not all coming together and then communicating with each other, that we're all getting screwed over in this whole deal. And we really need to come together, because this is when we'll find out that, oh, it's you too, hey? You too, eh? Yeah, that's it. Okay, let's get together and let's put a stop to this, because it needs to stop. It needs to end now, and it needs to end yesterday, actually. And this is where we are. This is absolutely where we are. Super chat from Just a Dildo, that fancy French name, $5 super chat. Living in BC is like getting a balloon knot tongue punched daily by a woman with a mustache. When will it end? Your analogies, amazing. Thank you so much. Let's get into this. A few stories as we're getting into this. I've showed this one a couple of times because this is a thing. This is from Toronto Sun, saying Trudeau should do right by Liberals and step down. Of course, the Toronto Sun, a right-leaning publication, and obviously goading him to step down. But it's not only coming from the right. Where is it coming from? Here is the Toronto Star. We all know this left-leaning rag. I mean, what else can we call this? Justin Trudeau should step down before the next election, majority of survey respondents say. And they go on to say that, yeah, it would be a good idea for that punk to step down entirely. Nobody wants him, and especially the Liberals, because he's destroying their platform. Now, interestingly enough, we have more of this coming out, and it's amazing. We've got this from CTV News, of all sources. Don Martin, who will step up and have the talk with Trudeau? Who's going to step up and say it? Who's going to say it? Nobody wants you, Trudeau, and even surprisingly, the left don't want him. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting. Actually, I was having a chat earlier with who was it? I was talking with Wyatt Claypool, and he had a video out. Oh, I gotta get the link to that so you guys can all share this one out too. He had a video that he just put out, really good video, talking about the establishment and how the establishment thinks that like choosing Pierre Poilievre was a bad idea, and how sorely wrong they were. Sorely wrong. They were just way out to lunch on that whole thing. Let me pull up the video so I can give the link so you guys can at least bookmark it and watch it later, because he nails it. He absolutely nails it in this. Let me pop this up top here. Waboosh. Get that up here. Okay, so for the National Telegraph, this of course is Wyatt Claypool. Again, go on over and support him. But he gives a really good talk about how they absolutely got it all wrong. They thought, they thought Aaron O'Toole was a good call for that. Anyway, next week, next Friday live stream, I'm going to be having Wyatt on to chat about all of this stuff. So tune into that. I'm looking forward to it. He's got a lot of great things to say. And just listen to this. It just cracks me up.
In 2015, younger Canadians embraced the Liberals and Justin Trudeau, thinking that things would be different, right? They wanted to change from the past, those sunny ways. Fast forward now to 2023, and it looks like young Canadians they're deserting the Liberals. But the interesting thing is they're going in two directions. They're not just going to one party. There are some young Canadians, and I would hazard to say those are the ones that are struggling to pay the bills, struggling to work, trying to navigate in a post-pandemic world, who are drifting to the conservatives.
Ooh, big
And
bad
then there
conservatives.
are other former young
Just
liberals.
listen how he talks about drifting to the conservatives as if it's just a big bad thing to happen, but it really is a thing. People are drifting over to the conservatives. They're talking about the economy and real issues.
Who are going to the New Democrats because they're probably frustrated. They want to see more action on climate change. They want to see more on reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, more on...
No, they don't. No, they don't. They don't want to see more action on climate change and more action on the thing on Indigenous peoples, which ended up becoming one of the biggest hoaxes we've seen in a long time with this whole, now we've got a holiday over mass graves that didn't actually ever happen. Wow, that should be embarrassing for people, shouldn't it? When are they going to come out and help rebuild those churches and put those statues back up? And talk about how, you know, John A. Macdonald and all of this stuff. Rename John A. Macdonald Drive in Ottawa. They changed the name of these roads. It's gross. It's gross what they've done. But this is the reality of the situation. Why are people messed up and pissed and veering away from the Liberals? And you have a young generation are going towards the Conservatives because they're not going towards the NDP. Just look at the poll numbers. NDP's numbers are dropping too. So this guy's out to lunch when it comes to that. But it was entertaining to listen to him try to have his little struggle session here for the CTV news, so he doesn't get fired from his job. I'm assuming, because he is speaking truth in some sense of the fact that Trudeau needs to go, and even the Liberals are starting to notice, and they're starting to say this. This is this is for real. Anyway, what are the reasons why people are trying to get out of this and get away from Justin Trudeau? Well, look at the expenses that we're all paying. And this is Franco Terrazzano of the Taxpayers Federation. He's been on the show. He's great. He's an awesome spokesperson for people who pay taxes. This is what he had to say.
Taxes are making your life more expensive, especially at the pumps. So in total, taxes make up more than a third of the pump price here in Canada, about 55 cents a litre. Now, depending on what province you live in, you could be paying a federal fuels tax, a federal sales tax, a provincial fuels tax, a provincial sales tax, a federal carbon tax, and now a second federal carbon tax. And oh, by the way, in some cities, you also might be paying a transit tax on top of all of it. Now let's add a little bit of insult to injury, shall we? The federal government and all provinces east of Manitoba also charge their sales tax on top of those taxes. So they tax the fuel and then they tax those taxes. It's called the tax on tax. It's very pernicious. We got to get rid of it. Now, federal taxes make up a huge chunk of the cost, and it's a reason your life is getting more expensive. Federal taxes make up about 31 cents per liter of gasoline. But that big tax bill is about to get bigger because of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's carbon tax hikes. 31 cents per liter of gas is the federal tax take right now, but in only 7 years, in 2030, the federal taxes on gasoline will be about 74 cents per liter, which means that federal taxes alone will cost a family filling up their minivan about $56 in 2030. Look, I don't have to tell you, you know
just
this,
the taxes
but many
alone.
Canadians are already struggling.
Just the taxes alone on a tank of gas in a minivan will be $56. That is insane. That's absolutely insane.
Right now, with the high cost of living, people are worried that they, might not have enough money to make ends meet. They're worried that they may not be able to afford to fuel up their cars to get to work, or to even take their kids to the cottage to enjoy some sun. So here's what we're saying. We're saying Canadians need higher carbon taxes, like we need a kick in the head. And that's why we're right out front of Parliament Hill, right outside of the Prime Minister's office, calling on Trudeau to end his tone-deaf tax hikes. Now, we hear Trudeau talk about affordability all the time, but if Trudeau was really serious about making your life more affordable, he would scrap his carbon taxes.
Yeah, get rid of it. Just get rid of it. It's so straightforward. It's so easy. It would be that easy. It would be such a massive relief on people, everyday people, like all over the place, straight up, big, massive drop in the cost of living overnight. drop the carbon tax. And British Columbia as well. British Columbia has its own carbon taxes, and we're going to get into that. We're going to definitely be getting into that. But this is the case right now. But now, why is a lot of the other costs of living going up? And a lot of people are talking about these things. Scott, thank you so much for the $2 super sticker, super chat. Tax me harder, daddy. Yeah, exactly. Now, what the thing that's hurting a lot of people is some people were able to get around, okay, the carbon tax, they're paying more, people who believe in all this crap. Obviously, people who don't believe in all this stuff, Clyde tax something, yeah. People who don't believe in all of this stuff, that the climate is about to catastrophically explode and we're all going to be living underwater, because the sea levels are supposed to rise. They haven't risen yet. Not one iota. They haven't risen at all. But, overnight, it's about to happen any minute now. So most of us are not buying into this stuff. And, well, some people are. And those people who are have been biting the bullet and saying, well, I'm doing it for the climate. I'm doing it for this. And even they are starting to hurt in this whole thing. And it's a large amount of this is based on the cost of housing, how much it costs to live in a house. Because, well, unless you were given a house, unless you own your house outright, you're paying a mortgage on it. If you're not paying a mortgage on it, you're paying rent on it, and somebody's paying a mortgage on it. And you're paying at the price of the rent, and the rents go up because the mortgage prices are going up. G Meister, the $2 super check, no tax on the like button. Get on there. Hit that like button. It's free. There's no tax there. We got 652 people in the chat here. Let's get that. Oh, we're like half of that for the likes. Let's see the likes climb a little bit. Let's get closer, a little bit closer to parity on the likes versus people viewing the show tonight. Anyway, let's get that one on there, and make sure you're subscribed. If you're new to the channel, hit that notification bell. It lets you know when we go live, and it lets you know when new videos are out. Obviously, this is the way we do things. But let's get into this because people's housing costs are going up overnight. We're talking about people took out loans. They took out these things. Now, what did the Bank of Canada have to say just about a year ago? Well, they said that interest rates were not going to go up, and they weren't going up anytime soon. Here's the president of the Bank of Canada himself talking about just that.
The COVID-19 pandemic has caused an unprecedented fall in economic activity in Canada, and the recovery will require considerable monetary policy support. Our overriding message to Canadians is that the bank will be there to provide monetary stimulus for an extended period to support the recovery and to return inflation to the 2% target. Interest rates are very low.
Yes, they are.
And they're going to be there for a long time.
That's a lie.
We recognize that Canadian businesses are facing an unusual amount of uncertainty. And so we have been unusually clear about the future path for interest rates. If you've got a mortgage, or if you're considering to make a major purchase, or you're a business and you're considering making an investment, you can be confident that interest rates will be low for a long time.
That is direct financial advice. Hey, take out debt. Take out debt. We're going to keep that interest low for a long time. But what happened? A year later, they started to climb. They started to climb right to the point where they're at 5% now, and that's a prime rate. People's mortgages are sitting around 7%-ish. This is the way things have been going. So that was absolutely big old fat lie from the Bank of Canada. And now we're seeing stuff like this. Concerned Canadian on Twitter saying Trudeau's penchant for unconscionable and uncontrolled spending is counter with what the Bank of Canada is trying to achieve. And it's really no joke about this. This is from the Financial Post. This is an article. Opinion: Liberals need to help Bank of Canada slay inflation, not hinder it. Just a dildo with a $2 super chat. I don't trust dudes who wear panties. Tim Macklin, what? I don't know that story. But here's the thing. what they're saying is the Bank of Canada is raising interest rates to stop all the spending, to stave back inflation. And what is happening? The government of Canada's going, forget it. I don't care. I'm going to spend anyway. We're going to increase the budgets. We're going to spend more. Everybody gets a whatever, you know, get it out there. We're going to spend all the money willy-nilly, no problem. And that's where it's at. Rob McFallon with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much. This is a deliberate assault on our country's economy. It would appear to be the case where Justin Trudeau is just, nah. I know that, you know, people are trying to turn it around and make it so we'll have, you know, this is the plan, or this is what should happen, is we should have a recession, but we should have a sharp one, a very sharp one, and then the recovery comes quickly. No, they're not even in recession territory, the Trudeau camp. They're in let's keep spending territory. Pretend that it never happened, that this stuff hasn't gone downhill. It's absolutely gone downhill. And this is what we're seeing. Will Trudeau government breach the David Dodge rule? Now, what are they talking about in this article? Rising bond yields are putting Ottawa on a costly path when it comes to servicing the debt. Now, what I found most interesting in this article is you scroll all the way down to the bottom, and basically a former Bank of Canada governor, David Dodge, it's so funny, it's in the title, but they throw it way down at the bottom. As a guardrail for policy, former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge has proposed a 10% prudence rule as an anchor for the federal government, whereby debt servicing charges are kept at no more than 1/10 of revenue. Now, this is a recommendation. It's not a law. They're not bound by it, but this is where we're at. This is where we're at, where even the former governor of the Bank of Canada is coming out and saying, "You kidding me? Why are you still spending money? Why are you still spending money? You know, you're foreclosing on the country. This is ridiculous. What are you doing? How do you have the gall to keep going at it and keep increasing the budget? Where are we in Canada right now? We are at some major risk. This is Better Dwelling. This is an article that goes back to December of this just past December. Hugh Jass with the beautiful name and the amazing super chat. It's just what a great name. Thank you so much for the $10. I think Trudeau genuinely hates Canada and is actively trying to destroy it. Losing his majority in 2019 was the first time he had ever been told no, and he has been seething about it ever since. I think he was working at destroying us since before 2019. But yeah, no, you're right on that. Eat Me with the $5 super chat. The guy from the Bank of Canada is a ski buddy. Just kidding, but still. Right? Prep Rebel with the $27.99 super chat. Trudeau is doing this to put all of the rest of us under his heel. Trudeau and the Liberals need to go. Everybody is saying this now. It's amazing that all of the Liberals are now on our page about Trudeau's gotta go. Gotta go. He's destroying our country, and he's doing it by destroying our economy. It's ridiculous. And this, I don't know. It's hard to say that this is not intentional. Anyway, Better Dwelling. This is from December. This is when they got the information about national or household mortgage debt. Canadian mortgage debt hits 100% of GDP. Crisis risk surges. We're in a crisis. Anybody who says that we're not in a crisis at this point is just got their head in the sand. It hasn't hit quite as hard yet, but it's incredible how much people owe in mortgages, and it's gone up. It started in 1990, and this is measured in trillions of dollars. So it was at $230 billion across all of Canada in 1990. It is now at a whopping $2 trillion of mortgage debt in Canada. That's more than our GDP as an entire nation. when are we going to clue in that this is just insane? More Canadian homeowners extend mortgage amortization periods. Big bank data reveal. Now, what does this mean? It means that people are taking their mortgage as their monthly rates have gone through the roof to crazy unaffordable ranges. The banks have done them a favor and said, okay, well, we're just going to back end the mortgage payment. So I know you're underwater and you can't even make the interest payments right now, but we're just going to do this for a short period of time, making the loan like 30 years long. And that's just on paper, right? Amortization just tells you if you're paying this current rate, it'll go until the end of time entirely. But what happens with this is, well, we're in a situation where they start putting the payments on the backside of the mortgage. So the payments, you're just adding more interest onto the loan entirely, and then it's just more and more, longer and longer and longer. Now they're hoping that they could just do this for the short time that interest rates are going to be up, right? So we're going to have interest rates at whatever for X amount of time, but interest rates eventually will come back down. Now, this may not be the case. This may not be the case that interest rates could come down. They could stay up until the market flips. And I think this is the point. The point of this is they need to stay high until prices come down. So they're just trying to fight time, the inevitable in this, and they're actually causing people to owe more money. And this is just sad. Now, the Bank of Canada is to hold rates steady on September 6th. This is the prediction from Reuters. Home prices fall in 2023. So the home prices are falling, and they think that, oh, they're just going to hold. I personally think that they're going to go up even further. I think I've been predicting 50 basis points. So that's 0.5%. We don't know. I know Reuters. I give all the sources here. If they're saying something, I take everything into consideration at the same time. It's fun to rip on them as well. But yeah, Reuters is making a prediction. They're one of the first to come out and say what the Bank of Canada is going to do on the 6th. We'll see. We'll see what they end up doing. But yes, our economy is in decline. Canada's overall economy shrunk to 2.02% in the second quarter, and that's where we're at with that. These things happen now, and this is where it's supposed to go. When you raise the interest rates, it's going to go down. My buddy predicted 10% remnant. I'm hearing that from other places too, and I'm hearing that from sources that are within government agencies. Not directly. I'm hearing this third party. This is why I haven't reported on it. But I'm hearing rumors of interest rates going up to 10% as well. So that's a reality. But yeah, the economy needs to come to a screeching halt. This is what's going to happen before the situation fixes. And this is what a recession is. That's the economy slowing right down. And that's the reality of the situation. Deleveraging cycle in Canada, housing inevitable as interest rates rise. We're going to see prices fall. And this is what, real estate agents definitely don't want, but it's the reality of the situation. Now, they could here in British Columbia, not even just on the federal level, right, on the provincial level, they could do us all a favor and scrap the carbon tax. This is a thing. Now, we've gone all the way from $20 per ton on carbon dioxide emissions or equivalent emissions. I don't know how they exactly determine how much or where to price this and how much to measure it by, but they have these numbers. Started at $20 per ton, and it's all the way up to $65 per ton as of April 1st, 2023. This is just in British Columbia alone. They could save the industry. They could save a lot of industries and a lot of people's finances if they would just fix that. But here we have David Eby. He's coming out and begging the Bank of Canada to, would you please just turn down the interest rates, and then we can keep going with this bubble economy.
Now, I'm hearing from British Columbians every day that are being crushed by the costs of daily life. And one of those big impacts that they're seeing is ever escalating interest rates.
I would love to write them a letter as well, saying the same thing, because it's impacting my life. It's impacting my career because I work as a realtor.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself there, because I work as a realtor. Someone who's been profiting immensely from this this whole bubble economy is realtors. People in the realtor business. Yeah, I know insiders in the real estate business, and these people get upset when a house doesn't close on the first day. Like, no joke. They just want to do the transfer paperwork, pawn off all the other work to other people, do the transfer paperwork, and then get their $30,000 commission on a house. They'll scoff at, like, oh my God, another showing. Oh God, no. So yeah, I'll sleep well at night if a bunch of realtors aren't doing so hot in the market anymore. But it's not just housing that's up too high. Prices of everything are gone up so crazy. This is a tweet I shared in my video earlier today. Gary Vidal, MP here, says, while visiting a far northern community in my riding this week, I stopped by the grocery store to document food prices. PM Trudeau's carbon tax is making life unaffordable. He's out of touch, and people are out of money. It is time to axe the tax. Now, these are crazy prices. Have a look here and just pop this up here. Hopefully you can get the chat in here at the same time as these prices. But Robinhood all-purpose flour, $41.49. Are you kidding me? Milk is at $16.79 for a gallon of milk. It's $18 if you want chocolate. We've got $26 for a tin of coffee, and we've got $15.29 for a jar of peanut butter. Not kidding. And someone pointed it out in the comments. They're like, well, these are northern communities. A lot of this the cost is because of transportation. Of course, transportation, it'll cost a lot of money to get that stuff up there. Well, it doubly makes it more expensive for people that live up there when it's the transportation that's being taxed. It's a fuel tax, this carbon tax. Yeah, it's going to cost everybody much more money to get their stuff. It's just unbelievable that they can justify this, pop it out there. But as people get away from Justin Trudeau, well, where are some people going? As the CTV guy said, as Justin Trudeau collapses in the polls, here's why you can expect his government to only become even more far left. Hint, because of this guy. Because of this guy. And that's where we're at with this. Oh man, I couldn't believe this. And one article that it drove me nuts here today, because a lot of people are saying, oh, well, we need a universal basic income, and this is how, like, this is low tier thought from people. But we need a universal basic income that'll make sure everybody stays afloat. Well, you're just gonna print that money. It'll just exacerbate the whole situation and cause inflation to be even worse. You can't just print money and give it to people. But this is what people are actually advocating for. And this was an article from CTV News. And this was a BC study gave 50 homeless people $7,500 each. And this is what they spent it on. And of course, it gets into the fact that, they didn't spend it. It was a nice surprise that they didn't spend it on drugs and all this other stuff. But in the article, they do mention that they were handpicked, selected people that weren't, no crazies were in the selection of people for this thing. And at the same time, the people who were selected, were all responsible people. So if you put this out there for all the homeless people at large, you could probably see a lot of a different situation. I'm going to give you guys this video to watch while I try to set things up, because I've got Jeff Evely coming in, and we're gonna get started on that, but I've got to just set it up and get him in here. So I'm gonna leave you guys with this for a moment to watch this.
When it comes to helping homeless people, is it better to give them cash with no strings attached so they can get back on their feet? A UBC study suggests it could be a better strategy for tackling our homelessness crisis. It also shatters stereotypes about the poor and how they handle money. CTV's Abigail Turner has the story.
People experiencing homelessness, they can't be trusted with cash.
People tend to dehumanize individuals in homelessness. We think they're less warm, less competent, less capable, especially when it comes to money management.
But results from UBC's latest research is proving that to be wrong. Jiang Zhao researched 50 people experiencing homelessness in Vancouver who were given $7,500 each. Their spending was then tracked for 1 year. The results?
People predict that the cash recipients will spend over $300 per month on alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes, whereas in reality, the spending was around $100 per month.
The findings showed those who received the money spent 99 fewer days homeless, increased their savings, and spent less time in shelters. People like Ray, who was interviewed by the project creators 3 years ago after receiving the cash.
I was homeless. I had no real income, and when I did make the income, it was to survive.
The study did not include people with severe mental health or addictions issues, but it's something Zhao believes does not make up the majority of people who are homeless.
And there are harmful stereotypes that kind of assume that everybody struggling with homelessness faces those similar kinds of issues. But I think one thing that we would note, or one thing that we would say, is that there's so many different experiences that people have.
The findings are something researchers hope will shape future government policy, as it saved more than $700 per person per year.
The cash transfer generated a net savings for government and society. It's cheaper than what we currently spend on homelessness.
A basic level of just dignity and autonomy can really have an impact and change a person's life.
The next phase of research is to replicate the study in other Canadian cities before expanding to the U.S. in hopes of continuing to break stereotypes. Abigail Turner, CTV News.
Well, in the hopes of bringing on a, the idea would be bring about universal basic income for everybody in society, and while we all know where that would go, much more economic turmoil because of rampant inflation. At that point, you can't just print your way into prosperity. It's not gonna work. But anyway, I wanted to I took the time there to queue up, because we've got a special guest tonight and want to make sure that I had all the scenes ready to go with that. Now, yesterday I did a recording and I published this morning. That was me talking with Jeff Evely from Veterans for Freedom. And after we had our chat, the initial reason to have him on was to talk about the 1 million person march that's coming up. But as we got talking, he started talking about this, what I'd never heard of, and this is called generational theory. And it really started blowing my mind. And I'm like, hold on a second. This is something we need to do in a podcast. And I can't just leave this for my ears only. I need to put this out for the community writ large so everybody can hear about what this theory is, because it really had me intrigued. And well, without further ado, let's get back and bring back in Jeff. Jeff, thank you so much for joining me for one more time, another round, so we can talk about this. And man, you were blowing my mind yesterday. But anyway, thanks again for coming back.
Yeah, my pleasure, Clyde, and thanks for the kind words. I'm glad I sufficiently blew your mind with the Strauss-Howe generational theory. That's the name of the theory.
That's the name of the theory. So Strauss-Howe generational theory. Now, give us a quick, before we dive deep into it, give us the quick overview of who's Strauss-Howe and where does this theory come from?
So it was first developed there back in the late 80s and eventually published in a book called Generations, The History of America's Future. I think that's a subtitle. And it was written by two guys, Neil Howe, who's an economist and a demographer, and Bill Strauss, who's a master of literature. And they joined forces to go back over history and the history of the market, and also a lot of literature, like the different stories that humans have told over the centuries. And what they came to realize, now what Neil Howe was trying to do is he was trying to predict long-term market trends. And what they came to realize is there is this recurring pattern in the market that tracks at regular intervals. And we see this pattern of boom and bust all the time. And the big crashes come around at pretty regular intervals. Right now, it's at about 88 years. And if you go back further, it's more like 100 years, but it seems like it's about 88 years. And so it's called a saeculum, or a great year. That's what the ancient Greeks would have called it. And it has 4 seasons. It has a spring, a summer, an autumn, and a winter. Winter, like in the calendar year when days are at their darkest. Winter in the great year is when times are at their darkest. And that's where we are right now. And so the reason that this happens is because with the regular intervals is because each generation born in our society follows a particular generational archetype. Mm-hmm. And there are 4 generational archetypes. There's the prophet, as in the Prophet Muhammad, those who found our religions, the nomad, the hero, and the artist. And those 4 generational archetypes just continue repeating and repeating and repeating over and over and over again, all throughout history. So if you go back 4 generations, you'll see the Second World War. 4 generations before that was the American Civil War. 4 generations before that, the American Revolution. 4 generations before that, the Salem witch trials. And it just goes on and on and on, all the way back to the Garden of Eden. And
what's crazy to me, though, is like it actually even manifests itself in our literature and our storytelling and everything. It's crazy because you kept using Star Wars, and I resonated with that because I like Star Wars. I've always liked the original series. You can get bent if you want to talk about the new ones. You go watch them if you want. I never did. But
they suck.
The original trilogy was based on this. I mean, well, it sounds like it was based on it. Like it follows the same archetype so perfectly. I don't know. I just wanted to throw that in there so when people are listening to this, like think of like your storylines from popular movies or books or things like that, as well as our contemporary history and even old history as this all unfolds. It's just, you know what I mean? That's where I was when you were explaining this yesterday.
Yeah. And the Star Wars, I find, is a really effective analogy because everybody's familiar with the original trilogy, and it resonates quite well. So it follows a certain storyline that all of those epic saga type stories do follow. And what's happening is it's always the same 4 characters. Okay, so every generation, I mean, that covers all ages from cradle to grave. But the prophet generation, the ones who found our religion, when the prophet is in his elderhood, that's when we're in the crisis era. So it's called a 4th turning. And those are the 4 seasons that I mentioned, right? So we when we surmount a major crisis, we go into a first turning. First turning is a high economic upswing, population boom. Second turning is the awakening. That's when the new spiritual awakening takes place. The new religion starts, so to speak. The third turning is the unraveling. That's when the social mood decays. Like we have a sense that we're headed in the wrong direction, but things are still pretty good. We just have a sense that things are kind of going in the wrong direction. And then the 4th turning is the crisis. That's the crisis era. And most of our stories, the fact of the matter is, we tend to write more about the bad times than we do about the good. And so most of our stories tend to be about 4th turnings. And that's what Star Wars is. So the prophet is in his elderhood, and we represent the prophet in our stories as an old man with a long gray beard. In the case of Star Wars, that would be Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yeah. And it's always the prophet is in elderhood, the nomad is in midlife, and the hero is coming of age. So we see the prophet is Obi-Wan Kenobi, the hero coming of age would be Luke Skywalker, and the midlife nomad is Han Solo. So, and what's happening in the Star Wars, the whole series, really.
What about the villain? Where does the villain fit into all of that?
Well, the villain tends to be within the prophet generation. The problem that we're having in Star Wars, the problem that's happening in Star Wars, is that Obi-Wan is the only Jedi of his generation. So he and what he's doing, what happens is they prosecute the new spiritual awakening. The prophet is the one who prosecutes the new spiritual awakening when he's in his early life, and they form the factions. They form these factions in their early lives, compete for dominance throughout their midlives, and then when they're in their elderhood, whatever factions remain dominant, they drive the rest of us to total war. And that is what Obi-Wan is doing. Is he's going to Luke and he's telling him to go settle his old score with the Sith Lords. And so in the midlife nomad in this case would be Han Solo, like I said. And so when you enter into the crisis era, that's when the hero archetype is coming of age. The current moment, that's the millennial generation. That would also be the GI generation that fought and won World War II in the previous fourth turning. So it's the same generational archetype as the millennials are the same generational archetype as the GI generation. They're seen as pure, civic-minded, dutiful, and in my opinion, maybe a little bit servile, but because they're also the witch hunters of Europe. Okay, so during the Dark Ages, they would have been the witch hunters. But in Star Wars, Luke is a good hero, and Obi-Wan is a good prophet. But like I said, he's the only Jedi of his generation, and so. When the hero is coming of age, that's when we're entering into the crisis. In our situation, that would have happened right around 2008. And this is something that Strauss-Howe generational theory forecasted in 1991, is they said that the fourth turning would start. It always starts with a minor crisis, which is when a single institution goes into crisis. And this is what it's all about. It's about the institutional power. So when the prophet generation reaches peak institutional power, that's when we go into the crisis, and it's usually total war.
So they call it the prophet generation. We're talking about boomers here. Like, this is
yes,
we're talking about boomers.
It is the boomers.
Like for the Star Wars, I guess the Star Wars analogy would be like Anakin Skywalker. He's like kind of the boomer generation. Everything was kind of like perfect. It went great. And he's just put into a role, but he's all, and then he turns into a villain.
Anakin's a nomad.
Oh, Anakin's a nomad. Okay, because I was thinking he's
Anakin's
like the
boomer
that gets us in all this.
No, but okay. So the prophet, the reason why we follow these different generational archetypes is because of the era in which we spend our formative years. So the prophet spends his formative years in the immediate aftermath of the major crisis, when we're in the high, when the generation that surmounts the previous crisis, in this case World War II, and the GI generation, they came back to North America. They poured more steel and concrete than any generation before them or any generation since. They gave us vaccines, radio telephony, rocketry, space travel, SATCOM, the internet, to computers, like all of the technology. They ushered in the modern era, and really all that's happened since then is a refinement in the manufacturing process, where the components got smaller and the networks got bigger. But the prophet is the Leave It to Beaver childhood, right? So they're very much endeared by their elders, because we did it all for you, and we made these great sacrifices for you, and you guys are gonna lead the way into the next stage of the Enlightenment. And what happens is they raise them as indulged. And that is in the words of the theory. Those aren't my words. That's the words of the theory. In this case, it would have been the permissive parenting style of that commie bastard, Dr. Benjamin Spock, where they...
I don't know who that is. Sorry.
Yeah, it's
Benjamin
permissive parenting.
Benjamin Spock. Yeah. Who is this?
He was a GI, and I say he's a commie bastard because he was a social democrat. But he he wrote a book. I can't even remember the damn title of the book right now. I think I have it here somewhere. But anyway, yeah, it's he wrote a book. It was called The Common Sense Book of Baby and Child Care, and basically it was just. Yeah, so basically it was just like, it's fine, the baby's fine. If you're fine, the baby's fine, and don't worry about it. And so basically they don't discipline their toddlers.
That's this whole, we're oh man, we're suffering from that all these years later because we've developed so much further. In fact, actually, this is a perfect segue to a super chat that just came in a little while ago. Unacceptable Fringe with a $10 super chat says, "Love V for F and that video. Just a shameless reminder that the Young Kids Guide to Grooming drops in a few weeks, and we will be donating a part of the proceeds to Child Advocacy Center Calgary for abused children." So if you don't know, this is another book from Derek Smith. He wrote the How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom, and he's got another book coming out, the Young Kids Guide to Grooming. it's laid out like a Lord. So it'll be a funny one. Looking forward to seeing that. So check that out when it comes.
Right.
But yeah, child rearing really started going sour at that time. I know, like, because eventually it turned into this whole idea of like, and I call it the celebration of mediocrity, where everyone gets a prize and you don't want to take the hard work of, and I see it as lazy parenting, really. If you don't want to teach your kid how to accept being a sore, not being a sore loser, like teach them defeat, teach them all of these things, they can get into it. But instead what happens is they don't learn basic things like how to be told no. and as adolescents, when they're first learning this, it becomes something even more detrimental in their lives because they haven't learned these important life lessons as a toddler, and they're learning them as adults. Michael McLean for $2 on the super chat says, "Dr. Spock said no spanking. Now look at us."
Yeah.
Right. So
exactly,
that's where we're at.
And not only that, no breastfeeding. Like,
he said
my
that?
God.
Oh, you muted.
They're bottled. I mean,
there you go.
They only got 50% of what the rest of us did on the SAT scores in the United States.
So he actually advocated to not breastfeed children?
He was just like, if you're fine, the baby's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry. And that's what happened. Lead in the baby food, lead in the gasoline, fluoride in the water, flopping around in front of the TV, which back then was basically just a microwave spark plug that's really only appropriate for long range radar applications. So that's brain damage. That's
awful stuff. So being a father, what I learned raising my kids is that my wife, she calls it skinship, like being skin on skin contact is very important, like even with fathers. So like, dad, just lay on the couch with the shirt off and have your kid, kind of thing. And breastfeeding is like this emotional dance that mothers have with their child, and there's pain and there's all these things that lead to empathy for the kid and the mom. And so there's emotional stuff, and then there's
no empathy.
Well,
they don't have any empathy.
Well, and that's horrible, right? To put kids in that situation. So there's empathy, but then there's also like nutrients that you wouldn't get from formulas and stuff. Like there's all kinds of things that have to do with your immune system and all of that. This is nature's way of doing complex things. Why would you upset that? That's absolutely wrong.
Well, exactly. And I mean, 35 to 45 years later, we got a new breed of killer on the scene. The serial killer.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when's the last time you saw a serial killer that was 35 to 45? It hasn't been this century. Where are all the Gen Xer serial killers? Right. I'm 44. I'm in the youngest cohort. So where are all the Gen Xer serial killers? I mean, it was
never even
Colonel Williams, Russell Williams, the Colonel Williams, Robert Pickton, Paul Bernardo, Mark LePan, Lake Hole Polytechnique, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, the Unaboomer, the Zodiac, presumably still at large, and bind, torture, kill, Jeffrey Dahmer. Like I can go on. So where are all the Gen Xer serial killers?
I don't even know how to answer that.
They're not my age anymore, right? They got older.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Robert Pickton was 52. He was apprehended in 2002.
Again, with the mind-blowing stuff, I have to look into more data like that and see. I mean, because you take things at face value, but I'll go look into it a bit myself too. But
I got a presentation if you want to see it.
Oh God, you've got everything. Well, I want to get more into this generational theory because
Sure.
I'm absolutely enthralled with this.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that's part of it. All of that is part of it.
No, it's the whole thing. It's Strauss-Howe generational theory in a nutshell here. I got about, but it's up to you. Yeah, just keep going. Whatever you want to do. I got about 55 slides.
Wow. Okay, you've got 55 slides. Well, yeah, maybe if you wanna pop those up in the chat, I can get them up like we were doing yesterday.
Just do the share screen.
Yeah, just do the share screen like the same as you did yesterday. And
okay.
I mean, just like it's unbelievable because. I mean, fiction is always mimicking, or art imitates reality, and but does it, or you know what I mean? Like, are we making predictions on how things go? And also, like, nature is cyclical, and to think that there is not cycles in every aspect of life and the cosmos, it would be, I mean, that would be naive to say that doesn't exist with us as humans as well. And to see this kind of cyclical thing, it makes me go, well, of course we would have some sort of cyclical thing, because in nature you see cycles. So, but I had no idea it was like this. you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And only 4 generations. How do more people not discover this?
Great question. But I mean, like, the ancients had some sense of it. They had a sense that there was a cyclical nature to time, to history, and they called it the saeculum. That's what the Greeks called it. And we, like, linear time is really more of a modern Western conception. It didn't come around until, just a few hundred years ago or something like that. Previously, people did view it as being cyclical. And, like, Mark Twain said, history may not repeat, but it sure does rhyme. He was a nomad gener. And the nomad is, I say Anakin was a nomad because what's different is, like, the prophet is raised as indulged, but then they come out into their early lives as self-righteous narcissists, prosecuting the new spiritual awakening, just gaslighting and terrorizing their elders so they don't have to take any responsibility. And they raise their own kids as underprotected. And in the case of the current saeculum, that was latchkey kids back in the 1980s. It was, double the rate of abortion, double the rate of murder under 5, double the rate of child abuse, double the rate of child abandonment, child rape, child homelessness. So that would have been my generation's childhood. And
I think we've got a bit of a mute.
Highly competitive.
Sorry, I lost your audio for about 10 seconds there.
It's a little weird on this end, yeah. But so the nomad is raised as underprotected. In the case of the current saeculum, it would have been the latchkey kids of the 1980s, and also like the big wheels, rollerblades, skateboards. Heavily competitive in sports, went on to be the first generation of professional cage fighters, veterans of Afghanistan and Iraq, as I am myself. We tend to be the war veterans, because once the prophet gets into peak political power, as every generation does in its midlife, they start driving us off to these proxy wars that don't really produce any results or resolve in a way to everybody's satisfaction. So that would be Iraq and Afghanistan. The previous saeculum, it would have been the First World War, where nobody was satisfied, and they wasted their sacrifice and just drove them right back to war for World War II. What happens is, like in Star Wars, I'll go back to the Star Wars analogy here. You have the prophet in their early elderhood, and then you have the midlife nomad, and you have the hero coming of age. And they go through this whole fourth turning, the great struggle between good and evil, that is the whole human story. And the crisis resolves when Han Solo, when Han Solo is the oldest man left standing, and everybody else is kind of a ghost in the background, and they're dancing with the Ewoks, and that's where the Crisis era resolves, and the new,
so is
the new speculum starts.
So basically, right now we got the boomers that are at the helm. They're at the helm of all
That's
of
right.
this, and they're the ones driving us into total war. Now, okay, so right now this is what's coming out in the media, right? And a lot of people are talking about this. I think even Tucker Carlson was talking about this, how they may actually postpone the next U.S. election because Donald Trump might get elected, and there's such a fear that he might get elected. And this is what really blows my mind of this whole situation. Bear with me for a second. Suspend your disbelief.
Certainly.
And the idea is that Donald Trump is so dangerous that he's gonna cause World War III. Now we had one term in office, and there was peace everywhere. I mean, he didn't make peace, but I
love the guy.
He didn't start any new conflicts, right? But now
he was the only boomer who didn't want to kill us,
right? So anyway, he's
Obi-Wan.
The warning is that if he gets in office, he'll cause World War III. So to stop him from causing World War III, they're gonna suspend the election so that they can have World War III. I'm really kind of backwards on this one. I don't know.
I know. I tried reasoning with them for 20 years in Canada's military, and it just can't be done. Okay, they're just not reasonable, and they have to get their way all the time because they were raised as indulged, and that's how their parents raised them. And that's what happens is when they start accruing power, they polarize us and drive us towards balkanization, and we can see this with the rise of Western separatism, and even in the United States, they're talking about civil war or maybe a peaceful divorce is something else that's being floated, but it's a Tower of Babel. That's what ends up happening, right? So if you look at the Tower of Babel, everybody's kind of going around talking past each other, and nobody can really communicate anymore. And well, does that sound familiar? Yeah, I probably, right?
Yeah.
So and that's analogous to the fall of the Roman Empire, whereas once upon a time there were two official languages in the Roman Empire, Greek and Latin. There was the Western state, which is we are the remnants of that, and there was the Greek state in the East, as in the Middle East and the Holy Land. Now it fell under Muslim territory later, but and when they invaded, and that was 100 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad in the next fourth turning after Muhammad died. But when the Roman Empire fell, we balkanized, and now all the languages are different. We can't communicate anymore, but they're all like Greek and Latin derivatives, right?
Oh, right. It is the Tower of Babel. It's the Tower of Babel. It's the whole concept that God forced everyone to speak different tongues so that they wouldn't be able to communicate with each other. That's really interesting, and that's anthropological. Yeah. This is just what occurred in our own history. Fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. So where does that bring us then? So if we're at the precipice of this fourth turning, how do we? Oh, we're not at the precipice. Okay.
No, we're pretty well into it now. So the fourth turning, it always starts with a minor crisis. Like I said, ours was the 2008 global financial collapse. The previous one was the market collapse that led to the Great Depression, the 29 stock collapse, and from there, the rest of the institutions fall like dominoes. So after the financial market, the global financial collapse, we saw like the G10 summit where the police force kettled everybody in Toronto. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, they went tyrannical, like out of the blue, and then we saw the campuses start going nuts with all of this wokeism on campuses. You go back and you look at every one of those statue topplings, and at the center you will find a boomer female, and it's the same thing with Canada's military. You go back and you look at every one of those scandals in Canada's scandal plagued military, and at the center you will find a boomer male. And then Canada's military actually went into crisis first. And I think this is maybe something that Strauss and Howe overlooked, but because of the younger retirement age and the higher rate of attrition, the military went into crisis first, and that would have been with the Somalia affair. And what did they do in the Somalia affair? Cover up, find the lowest man on the totem pole, throw him under the bus. That was the Gen Xer Kyle Brown who blew the whistle on the whole thing. And they threw him under the bus, and he was the only one who ended up going to prison. He did 5 years for it. And that's what they do. They scapegoated the unvaxxed for the pandemic. Like, it's nobody's fault there's a pandemic, but apparently it was the unvaxxed. And this seems to be the MO. This is like the boomer MO. This is the prophet generational archetypes MO. And I point to things like the story of the Garden of Eden, right, which is a fourth turning, because you have Yahweh, the elder prophet. Adam and Eve are the hero coming of age, and then the midlife nomad, by deduction, would be the serpent. And we tend to think of the serpent as being the bad guy, but is he really the bad guy, or did he just get scapegoated like Kyle Brown did for Somalia, or like Julian Assange did for blowing the whistle on the Clintons? And all that really happens in that story is the prophet, he lies. He's a liar. If you look at all of the stories, whether it's Yahweh or Moses or Muhammad or Abraham. Abraham is an excellent example because he lies. He says that he's going up to the mountain to pray when in fact he's going to kill the hero generation. And in the Garden of Eden, what happens is the prophet, he tells Adam and Eve that if you eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, then you will surely die. And what the serpent tells them is you will surely not die. You'll become more like gods. And they ate the fruit, and they didn't die. So Yahweh lied. The serpent told the truth, and they moved from a hunter-gatherer society to an agrarian society. So that's the next stage of the Enlightenment. Like I say, that's what happens when they surmount the crisis instead of falling to tyranny. Every one of these crisis eras has the potential for us to fall to tyranny. But when they surmount the crisis, they usher in the next stage of the Enlightenment, where there's higher standards of living, new technologies, all of this kind of thing. And that's what they did, is they adopted an agrarian lifestyle. And basically, like, what we understand about hunter-gatherers right now, I mean, they're savages, right? So so what's happening in the Garden of Eden is Yahweh is telling Adam that his place is in the garden, and you serve me. That's what he says. He says, you serve me. You go to the garden and you serve me the fruits. What we know about hunter-gatherers is, yes, they do have some horticulture, but the fruit grows in the latrine, because that's what a fruit is. You're supposed to eat the fruit and you ingest the seeds and then transport and fertilize them elsewhere. So the fruit grows in the latrine, and Yahweh is telling Adam to live in his latrine. He says, your place is in my latrine and you serve me the fruit. And if this theory holds all that far back, the serpent is the war veteran who's looking at this situation and saying, this is not the country I signed up to serve, kind of like where I am now. And he tells them the truth. He says, he teaches them the difference between good and evil, as in, don't do the Nuremberg defense, guys. Don't say you're just following orders. Like our ancestors fought a war, but the GIs, fought an enormous war over this thing, total war. And for that, I mean, they end up being ostracized, which is the punishment in hunter-gatherer societies. But they usher in the next stage of the Enlightenment with the agrarianism, and then they have two more sons. So the first one that the hero generation has is another prophet. That's Cain. And then the next one that they have is the nomad, because that's how the cycle continues. Mm-hmm. And what happens with Cain and Abel, right? So, Abel turns out to be a better man than Cain, so Cain kills him out of what I believe is envy. It's a story about the deadly sin of envy. So. Yeah,
that's the sin there. Now, a lot of people are going to say this whole analogy of God and the serpent and all that is blasphemous and shouldn't be seen.
That's me.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine you're offending a lot of people right now. I think there's some people in the chat that are not on board with that analogy of the Garden of Eden story. I look. And I've had my own opinions on the Garden of Eden story. I always thought that the serpent was not revealing the truth, but lying to them, saying like you could become like gods, you can be like them, and
they did, and that's what Yahweh said. He said, well, look at you guys, you're more like us, and so here are some clothes. He was making them walk around naked for some reason, so it sounds like he's pretty perverse.
Oh my God, you could have said a lot of people that.
serve me.
Yeah, I know, and people get sensitive about that. I've been
what
pretty
do we see
clear
right now? It's debauchery, right? And it's the same thing with Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, the elder prophet in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is Lot. And Lot is considered to be the only righteous man in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Mm-hmm.
But look at what he does. I only judge people by what they do, not by what they say. And he, when the Sodomites come to his door to say that he wants them to send the angels out so we may know them, which means to sodomize them. He says, no, please don't. Here, take my daughter. And he sends his virgin daughter out there, and she gets raped and murdered. And then he takes off, and his wife is turned into a pillar of salt. I think, and so this is the thing too, is when we build the institutions to new heights in the wake of the previous crisis, we create all of these new white collar jobs. And so the generation that's born in the wake of the previous crisis, in this case, the boomer generation, they become the white collar class. So they're the storytellers. They're the ones who actually write our stories.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of Lot, if you just look at what he's doing, he says that his wife was turned into a pillar of salt, and I'm like, yeah, maybe he just murdered her, because then he takes off to the mountain and he gets his daughter pregnant and blames her. He says that she got him drunk and knew him or whatever while he was drunk. And if I'm just sitting back as an objective observer, I'm kind of going, no, it sounds like you raped your daughter and blamed her.
It's been a long time since I've read the story of Lot. I'm sorry, so I don't have an argument to throw back at you. I know a lot of people are going to be saying that's I could totally understand how people are very, very well, let's just say people have their beliefs and all of that stuff when it comes to those stories. I think this is why I stuck with more of the fiction stuff. Personally, and I would just a big disclaimer. I'm not. I was raised Christian, but I've never been seen as like a believer, that type. I've always told people I'm pretty agnostic to that stuff. I try not to offend people when it comes to like their deeply held beliefs.
Well, now is the time. If you're ever going to offend people, I think now is probably the time. I'm just pointing to the stories. Like I'm trying to give this explanation of stories, and I think it's important to understand that they are the white collar class, the prophet generational archetype. In this case, the boomer generation, and we believe their stories. Like we still think that, like, say for example, that Vietnam was an unjust war. And that they were the hippies who gave us all a moral lesson about bodily autonomy with respect to the draft. But in fact, if you look at the data and if you dig into that a little bit, you'll see that it's a very different story. I mean, the fact of the matter is that conscientious objections didn't go up at all. They stayed the same. They were consistent throughout all of the wars. I mean, the GIs got drafted. The silent generation got drafted and went to Korea. Korea was the first Indochina war. Vietnam was the second Indochina war. Both of them were UN resolutions to declare a breach of the international peace and security, and passed to the Security Council, who voted to give the war effort to the Americans. The Americans declared war, and there were both efforts to contain the Chinese Communist Party. And its allies. But and what happened was, it wasn't just that they dodged. I mean, you want to submit your conscientious objection. You say, okay, I have a principled objection to this war. Here it is in writing. Let history be the judge, and you'll be on your way. That's how it works. But it wasn't just that. It wasn't just that they dodged, but the ones who did go, they gave us all these great new words like fragging, for example, so named for the boomers' preferred method of fratricide, which was the fragmentation grenade. So any officer who tried to lead them into combat, they would just throw that sucker into his bunk while he was sleeping. Makes it really hard to tell who did it because they're not traceable, and then they'd all stick together. And they murdered well over 800 of their own officers, whereas previously the U.S. wasn't even keeping statistics prior to 1968 on the practice of fratricide. There was also the massacre of My Lai that lost the popular support for the war. They were given a bad intelligence rep. They thought they were Viet Cong going in there, but when they got to the village, there was they encountered 0 fighting age males, no weapons caches, and they cut down every peasant in sight. They even shot babies strong enough to crawl from under their dead mothers, who died shielding them from the boomers' bullets. They raped women. They piled peasants up into the ditch, unloaded the rest of their ammunition into them. And when the chopper pilot who was passing by saw what they were doing, he landed his chopper in the field, and he ran up to the boomer LT, and he said, "What are you doing?" And you know what he said? "Just following orders."
These are the American soldiers, and this is the things that they did.
Yeah. Yeah, the American soldiers in Vietnam. And that's the thing, is there was nothing particularly extraordinary about that war. It's just that everything that happens to the boomers is a really big deal. Just like there's nothing extraordinary about COVID, but it's a really big deal because it's their pandemic. They're the ones that are running the pandemic response. And so
well, and that was a sentiment that I heard during the pandemic that really disturbed me and it bothered me. And it was from someone that I know. And I said, listen, I'm not giving some experimental thing to my kids. I'm not doing that. And we can't have these restrictions. We can't be, kids can't be in muzzles, and you can't be doing all of this. And the guy said to me, he says, well, my 90-year-old grandmother could get sick because of you people, and you need to. And I said, if this is a risk for that person, they can buckle up. They can hide away from it, but I'm not going to risk my child's rearing time. It's precious for someone who had a great life and is now at the very end of it. So you can preserve a little bit more of it. And it's like, sorry, Granny, we care about you and all this stuff, but if we need to protect you, we'll protect you. We don't put all of society in solitary so that people can stretch out a couple of more years for what? To ruin all the rest. And to me, it was the most selfish thing I could ever think of.
Yeah.
When I think about,
that's how they are.
The previous generations that did so much to sacrifice for the next generation. And this is what we're being asked to do. We're being asked to make sacrifices for the previous generation and for the next generation. Why? Yeah. We're sacrificing everything, and it's just, it really, that one really just upset me a lot. I'm just gonna get to a couple of these chats here. Chris B, member for 5 months, says, "I wonder when Trudeau will try convincing one of his kids that they're trans, as it would be boost daddy's popularity." G-Meister with a $5 super chat says, "I think this is great. A completely different view of biblical times, a real eye opener." So I grew up in a Christian house, and even saying the Lord's name in vain was like a big no-no. So apologies for like being uncomfortable around that, but no, I get it, and these are things that people do. I grew up in the generation where watching Monty Python was like taboo, you know what I mean? and I mean I love it, and everybody should be able to express themselves in the way they are. And apologies for that. I get squirmish around things that I was brought up to be squirmish around.
Yeah, it's such an important topic, though. And I advocate for radical candor. Just speak that unmitigated truth. Like if you're a little worried, oh, I better not say that, he's going to get offended. Say it, offend them. And I just love watching them squirm. Actually, I spent a lot of time. I tracked them like from the tactical to the operational to the strategic level. I was all the way up there at NDHQ, like rubbing shoulders with all the bigwigs and stuff like that. And you get them behind closed doors, and you just start speaking that unmitigated truth and watch them squirm.
Was it interesting?
Because they don't follow any of the damn rules.
So this is an interesting thing that I've noticed has happened over the generations, because it used to be, and like all the boomers' favorite stories growing up through childhood were these stories of Footloose and things like that, where it's the grumpy old preacher, he's the one holding you back. And, it's like Christian values are horrible. You got to ditch them because they're holding everybody back. And can't do this, can't do that. But then we've gone fully the other way, so far the other way that now the hippy dippy openness has become the thing that's suppressing everybody, and it's now this tyrannical power over us.
They're liars. That's all there is to it. That's what Seinfeld was all about. I mean, that was back in the 90s, right? That was the boomer generation in Seinfeld. And, it's not a lie if you believe it. And Seinfeld has a happy ending because the boomers all go to jail for being rotten people. But unfortunately, they're still at large in real life. And compare and contrast that with my generation, which was Friends back in the 90s, right? As in, we just bang all our friends until somebody drops the L-bomb, and then it's a relationship. We are
that's a funny way of putting it. That really is, because
we're a lost generation. That was like Ernest Hemingway's generation would have been the previous nomad generation, World War I, World War II. And Ernest Hemingway famously, he didn't coin the phrase, but he famously said in one of his plays that we are a lost generation. The rum runners, they came back from World War I, they got prohibition. We were in Iraq in the 90s, and they gave us like the Major League Baseball stuff over steroids. And that is an interesting compare and contrast between the boomer generation and the Gen Xer generation, because the boomers generation, their drug of choice was LSD, whereas the Gen Xers is steroids. We're highly competitive and very aggressive, but we mellow into pragmatic midlife managers and leaders, and we're better suited for stewarding the institutions through crisis. However, the boomers just will not let it go.
That's interesting. I'm in between generations. I'm like right at the cusp of the millennial generation. So I was born in 82.
You look millennial to me.
Yeah, so I was 82, so that makes me like right at the. Yeah. I'm an old millennial. I'm not a young millennial. So and most of my siblings
like an are.
Yeah, most of my siblings are all of my siblings are Gen Xers, and I remember everybody watching Friends growing up, and I remember all this stuff. But I was part of the next generation. I was part of it, but and I grew up on Super Mario Brothers and all of that stuff, and that's sort of, I'm a 90s kid at heart, because that's when my adolescence time was really. But yeah, I do notice a difference. You mentioned the drug of choice being roids. I'd say also Coke for the Gen Xers, and it was
booger sugar.
Yeah, booger sugar. I haven't heard that one, but for my generation, I guess later in my generation, it's probably Ritalin, and I remember this coming into school life. I remember them first bringing this stuff out there and saying, you need to, you're too hyperactive, you're doing this or you're doing that, and you need to be medicated. And I recall them saying this, and my dad just going, no, I've had 3 other boys and 4 girls, and they were all fine, and they you just need to run them. Get him out in the yard, and he'll just get tuckered out, and then that's the end of that. and then you don't have to worry about it. But if you want him to sit in a classroom, well, yeah, you got a handful now. You got a handful. You need to be more entertaining in your teaching style, or more disciplinary in the way you do things.
Yeah.
It was tough, yeah, and subsequently I seen a lot of people later in the years that went through the public education system, so many people being medicated, and it's just like it's almost the knee-jerk reaction now for bad behavior is just to medicate that stuff away. Like that is just such an awful thing to do.
I know.
And how does this play into the whole generational thing? Because that I see as a crisis. That is a crisis, and like, well, at some point we got to stop doing it.
That's not a full-blown crisis. That would have occurred like during the unraveling when things are, that's the third turning, right? When things are kind of moving in the wrong direction. We like everybody's doing pretty good, but there's a sense that the social mood is decaying and we're headed in the wrong direction. So that would be, you know, an example of how things are moving in the wrong direction. But now look at what's happening with Gen Z, with all of this hormone replacement therapy and the surgeries being performed on 12 and 15-year-olds, the sex changes in Canadian hospitals. And it's that's also, I think, well, it is another constituent of a fourth turning. If you roll the clock back 4 generations, you'll see the first sex change ever performed in the Weimar Republic. And if you go 4 generations before that, and lead up to the Civil War, say when the movie Gangs of New York was set in the lead up to the Civil War, and what do you see is ladyboys, the ladyboys at the clubs and stuff like that, the cross dressers.
Right.
So. And that's what happens is, see, the first turning is when the gender roles are the widest. And so the GI generation, they were homemakers and they were breadwinners. And then in the second turning, gender roles narrow. So we see things like third wave feminism, a plethora of harassment complaints in the workplace and stuff like this, despite the fact that the silent generation was already working side by side. As the silent generation actually prosecuted the civil rights movement. Not the boomers. Like they came back from Korea with their female counterparts and said, like, if she's good enough to go to war with me, she's good enough to work with me. And they marched together in the streets. And then the boomer generation, like, they tell the stories, right? So we think that it was them who did that, but it wasn't the hippie generation who did that. And so the gender roles narrow in the second turning, and then so you see the men growing their hair long, and then in the third turning, we see the gender roles get a little narrower. Like, I got my ear pierced when I was 9. And then in the fourth turning, gender roles are at their narrowest. And so what's happening here is that every generation rebels against its elders. It's all daddy issues. It all goes back to daddy issues. And so the boomer generation has daddy issues for the greatest generation, and they had very distinct, broad gender roles. And as they rebel against that, as they move up, the gender roles get narrower and they get narrower. So from the second turning, they get a little more narrow, third turning, a little more narrow. And now that they're at peak institutional power, it's the eradication of gender altogether.
So this isn't all boomers. Obviously, this is boomers that end up holding power in society. Like, not all boomers are the problem here. No, because I'm seeing the chat going, "Is this boomer bashing night? Like, what are we doing here?"
I mean, I love all my boomers, guys. That's not what it is. But I'm talking about the institutional power. The institutional power is what really matters. And if you just look at our institutional leaders right now, like General Vance was a total disgrace. He went around gaslighting us all and calling us a bunch of rapists in the military. But I was like, no, it's you guys. You guys have always been the ones doing this. That's what's been happening in Canada's military for 30 years. And now that they're at peak institutional power across the board, we see that Jordan Peterson, like his board of psychologists and everything, they want him to do a struggle session. And then you've got, Janice Charette, the clerk at the Privy Council office, and what's her name there? Jody Thomas, the National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister with no background in intelligence or security. They basically, as far as I'm able to tell from the Emergency Measures Act testimony, they basically orchestrated the whole invocation of the Emergencies Act. And then you've got Tinker Bell, the chief in Ottawa, who said he was going to hunt us all down.
Stephen Bell.
Yeah, Steve Bell.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, I just look at it. It's across the board. It's the editorial boards of the CBC, the prosecutors, the Supreme Court judges, the police chiefs, the generals, the deans, tenured professors. It's across the board.
What about leadership in Canada? Because we have Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland, who are, I believe, they're Gen Xers. I think they're the Much Music generation, and they're really throwing us for a hoop on this one.
Yeah. We'll go back to the Star Wars analogy for a second, because I talked about Han Solo, but he's not the only nomad. As we mentioned, Anakin's a nomad as well. Anakin is about 9 years older than than Han Solo is in that story. And that's what I see happening right now anyway, is that the elder Gen Xers are a little bit split. So they were left alone with the boomers for too long, and now they're addicted to that sweet, sweet cash. And when the nomad serves the elder prophet, like Joshua in the town of Jericho, you get a genocide. So, you know, the elder prophet told Joshua to lay waste to all the men, women, and children, the entire village, but the virgins you may keep for yourself. Even the livestock, he said, to slaughter, but the virgins you may keep for yourself for reasons better left imagined than described. But that is, but that's what happens. And so Justin Trudeau is he's a nomad, he's an elder nomad, and he serves the boomer hegemony. And other examples in history would include Hitler and Mao. As the Hitler and Mao were nomads as well. So that's what happens is when you get that combination, when the nomad serves the elder prophet, you get a genocide. But when he rebels, when he overthrows the prophet, then they usher in the next era of the Enlightenment.
And that's going to get into the next question. Tempest is asking in the chat. Okay. He says, what happens after the fourth turning and how do we recover?
So, like I said, it's a matter of the nomad generational archetype displacing the prophet generational archetype at peak institutional power. And when we do that, we usher in the next era of the Enlightenment. So the previous one would have been the Second World War. And what happened in the Second World War is that the generation that led us into World War I, when they were at peak political power, moved up to peak institutional power, led us right back into World War II. And in about 2 years before the end of the war, I think it was, they had another election in the United States, and the midlife generation came out overwhelmingly for the Republicans. They swept the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And the presidency actually switched hands from the prophet generational archetype, which was the missionary generation at that time. That would have been FDR, who allowed Pearl Harbor to happen so he could drag North America into the war because he wanted his war. And then he was ousted. They put in Truman, who was a nomad generational archetype. So they would be the World War I veterans. And now they were the leaders on the battlefields in World War II. And what he did is he fired the missionary generals like McAllister, and they put in guys like General George Patton, who was a nomad general and a veteran of World War I. And they led the Allies to victory in Europe. And just to give you some sense of what the nomad is like.
Well, you said a lot there before you get into that. So you said a lot there. So I had heard a lot of this. So this has been contested by some scholars, and some scholars say this fervently, is that the U.S. knew forewarning that Pearl Harbor was going to happen, and that it was allowed to happen because it was the ticket into this new conflict, and there was money to be made, and that was a big portion of what was going on there. Now, Japan contests that, and they say that no, they'd given for tons of forewarning for this. I used to live in Japan, and I've been to a bunch of the museums, and you know the victors always write the history, right? And so there's differing,
by and large,
there's differing historical reference to that. Some people will say that this or that, but we've seen in many other instances when it comes to war in the United States, even where they've provoked or put people in situations. The Gulf of Tonkin incident comes to mind, where they put people in a position in order to stir up a conflict and get widespread support in the masses, like for the masses. I think even it was even Donald Rumsfeld. I might be misquoting who it was, but I think it was him who said in the project for the New American Century, said we need a Pearl Harbor type event in order to go do stuff in the Middle East or what have you. And this is so like there are people in positions of power that want these conflicts, and that's a thing that is wanted, even though the general public don't. And especially after the First World War, the Americans were not having another war, and it wasn't until after Pearl Harbor that they had the moral support from the nation to go into that conflict. And I just wanted to throw that bit in there, because this is what I understand of it. And if you have a different understanding of it, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, with the Gulf of Tonkin, like I'd like to look back into that a little bit because I have been hearing that is that was a false flag, and I basically accept that right now until I know any better. But again, this is the boomer professorship, the historians. They may have exaggerated that a little bit, but what I would say, like in the case of the Gulf of Tonkin, that didn't happen. That's the claim that's being made. Is the ship was never really sunk, like the Americans weren't really attacked, this kind of thing. So, but it is the case, I think, often that our leaders kind of think that we're dumb rubes and they need to lie to us instead of just reasoning with us, and so they do these things where they hype this stuff up. But as far as the Vietnam War was concerned, like
that's all COVID was. That's all COVID was. It was hyping something up because we were dumb rubes and we went along with it. And for all those dumb rubes that went along for it, we're suffering the consequences of their actions now. Like this is where we're at.
Yeah, and what we've seen throughout COVID is the greatest, and this is the thing that nobody points out, is that it's the greatest. They'll say it's the greatest transfer between, the rich and poor, the greatest wealth transfer in all of human history. But it's a generational wealth transfer because it is guys like Larry Fink, from BlackRock, who are soaking up all the wealth, and that's what we saw and this is what they've done their whole lives. I mean, there was Enron, a big fraud where they all got rich. There was the mortgage bond market collapse that precipitated the global financial collapse, and that was Boomer Clinton who repealed the Glass-Steagall Act of 1938 that was put in place to prevent another crash, and it allowed the bondsmen to start buying up all these mortgages into bonds, and it eliminated that accountability for the mortgage brokers who just started writing a bunch of bad loans, and they just kept fraud all the way to peak market power. And when they got there, the whole bubble just burst and collapsed under the weight of their ineptitude. And what did they say? Well, we're too big to fail. And so they took a bunch more money, laid off all the other generations working in the trade so they could take their own bonuses. And then with COVID, they even went as far as to send the Canada Pension Plan out there to buy up all the residential housing at 20% over asking, scooping up all that residential housing to turn the millennials into a permanent renting class.
Mm-hmm.
I think they destroyed the predominantly Gen Xer and millennial owned small business sector and forced us to go all down to their corporations. And so it's been this incredible destruction of wealth in the younger generations. But the boomers, already the richest generation in all of godforsaken human history prior to the pandemic, are richer than ever.
That's actually true. I saw some of the statistics of boomer generation people's wealth actually growing in the recent times, while everyone else's wealth is dwindling and or not being able to acquire any in the first place. Now, I want to push back on the 08 crash thing, because this is a big thing that a lot of people say is that the mortgage brokers were behind it, and they're predator lending and all this other stuff that occurs, of course, but it was I mean, this was it took a lot of people dancing together to make this happen, and a lot of it was a lot of well-meaning or the road to hell is paved with good intentions types, where they say we need to make sure that people can get into houses. Well, how do we get people into houses? Well, you need to get them good jobs so they can afford houses. Well, in lieu of that, how do we do that? Well, I guess we could relax lending standards. Well, how do we? The lenders won't loan if they can't pay the mortgages back. Well, how about we back it with government money if they can't pay it back? This is so the lenders didn't go to the government and say, give us money for no reason. They said, give us money because you promised us money if we would irresponsibly lend it to people. So it was like the government in together with these bad lenders. The lenders would rather, I mean, you would take good loans, right? But they were taking bad loans, but they wouldn't take bad loans unless there was some sort of an incentive for them to do it in the first place. So it was a mixture of government.
It's the boomers. They're in it together. They're all in it together. It's not the rest of us.
Tempest for $5 in the super chat says, Jeff, what do you think the next 5 to 10 years look like in North America?
Actually, I'm about halfway through The Fourth Turning Is Here. It was just published in July. So Neil Howe did publish another book to say, like, yeah, this is obviously the major crisis that we forecasted would hit in the year 2020, plus or minus 2 years. And it is just the case that whatever crisis kind of floats into the regime's lap at this particular moment in our history, they will prolong and exploit for the purpose of tyrannizing the rest of us and soaking up all our wealth. But we're forecasted to come out of it between 2026 and 2030. He's now saying it could be more like mid 2030s because there's so much entrenched wealth because they are so damn rich, and they're just not letting it go of it. But also, I find like I do disagree with some of what he says sometimes. Like, I think his definition of boomer is a little bit too narrow. It's probably a little broader because of the permissive parenting style. But I tend to use Bruce Cannon Gibney's definition. He authored a book called A Generation of Sociopaths, How the Boomers Betrayed America. And that's where I get a lot of the stuff about Vietnam. It's true. He was a... well, he's a Gen Xer. We're very candid. And he was a Silicon Valley tycoon who was like, what the hell is going on in Silicon Valley? I mean, Google started out with a motto that said, don't be evil. And now, like, you know, they're closing everything down. Everything's getting really crappy. And in 2017, he published that book. That was what he discovered. He went through all the stats. Like I said, there was a 30% drop in SAT scores when the boomers aged into it. It's recovered since then. And that was what it was. It was the Gen Xers are basically creating all these awesome companies, but then when they go public and they open them up to the investors, the investment class just comes in like all for boomer, all for boomer, all for boomer, all for boomer, and now we have, you know, Big Brother where we used to have don't be evil.
So where does Klaus Schwab fit in all this? Because the World Economic Forum is a big thing, and Klaus Schwab, he's not a boomer. Is he a boomer? I'm not sure if he's a boomer. No. I think he's a little too old for that.
He's a silent general.
And his his dad was a tycoon in Hitler's Germany. He was actually like an industrialist. He owned the factories that made what ended up becoming banned internationally with the flamethrowers. They made flamethrowers that the Geneva Convention put a kind of stop to those for war use. So you can still use them civilian use to help with brush fires and stuff like that. But so he's not a boomer, but he's at the helm of this whole thing. He's obviously coming. It's funny that it's the fourth turning or the fourth thing here, and he calls it the fourth industrial revolution. I mean, that's a coincidence, obviously, but he's got this idea that we're all going to get away from capitalism. We're all going to get away from the market economy. And we're going to have, with what I can only describe, because I know economics and I know economic systems, he's describing like a fascist socialism, right? He's describing this idea where there's a facade of private property. Nobody really owns anything. You're all going to be happy, of course. You're going to eat your bugs. You're going to live in your pod, and you're going to do what you're told, right? And this is like the ultra nanny state that he's describing. It's beyond nanny state. It's sit in your cubicle.
Totalitarianism.
Yeah, totalitarianism. And it's, instead of shareholders, it's stakeholders. And that sounds good on paper. It sounds good at first because you think, well, we're all stakeholders. No, you're not. You're not. No, not you.
You're serfs.
Yeah, and that's it. So it's the stakeholders are them, and they'll own and run everything. So how does he fit into this whole intergenerational thing?
So he's a silent gener. They follow the archetype of the artist. They're the generation that's raised during the crisis. They're in childhood during the previous crisis. They're raised as suffocated. So that's Gen Z right now. That's the same generational archetype. And they tend to be accommodating as leaders. And so who are they accommodating? They're accommodating the boomer generation. And they would have given us the show like All in the Family, where Archie Bunker was portrayed. That's a GI gener who's portrayed as like bigoted racist. Mind you, he's the only one in the show actually has a job.
Well, incidentally, it's funny because he became the fan favorite. He was supposed to be the villain of the show, but everyone related to him so well that he was the star, right? And everybody hated Rob Reiner, the meathead who wrote the scripts.
Yes, that's right. And but the artist archetype, when they stay involved, when they stay active in their old age, like he's post retirement age, he's in his old age, he's not even in his elderhood like the boomers are. It tends to be bad. And like let me think now. Donald Rumsfeld, I believe, would also be a silent Jenner. So the analogy, going back to the Star Wars analogy. The silent Jenner in Star Wars would be Darth Sidious, right?
Okay.
He had the shadowy finger behind the scene. But what I will say about Klaus Schwab is, all of this stuff is kind of on the surface. Like the crisis would be happening no matter who Klaus Schwab's dad was or anything like that. It was going to happen regardless.
It's a cyclical thing.
And
it's not. There's no control there.
And I view the WEF as basically a proxy for China. And if you go to the WEF's website and you read a few of their articles, like say, for example, on the collapse of Sri Lanka, I mean, they're running interference for the Chinese because it was debt trap diplomacy, the banning of the fertilizer and all that stuff that led to the collapse of Sri Lanka. And the Chinese got this great port there now, this great international port with huge strategic value just off the coast of India. They have a 99-year lease with the Sri Lankans because that's the maximum that the law will allow. And they write a puff piece on the WEF website to say, oh, no, the Chinese were very helpful. These people, this corporation gave them a bunch of money, this loan, this other corporation gave them all this infrastructure. And then when they couldn't pay it, this other corporation came in or something like that. But it's a bunch of shell corporations.
So they tanked them
for the
on
Chinese
purpose
Communist Party
to get the communists in there.
Oh, they tanked them. Yeah. They that's what they do. They collapse states. It's the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. That's what Sun Tzu wrote in the 5th century BC in The Art of War. And that seems to be it's everything. The Chinese play Go, whereas Westerners play chess. We're looking for a single piece, but in Go, it's all pieces. You capture all pieces, the whole board at the same time. And that's what they do. It's economic. It's in cyber. The blue, gold, yellow strategy. That's the blue is for cyber, the gold is financial, and the yellow, oh gosh, I'm forgetting it right now. Let's say it's cultural. It's something like that. Maoist cultural revolution is what we're living through. But if you look at all of the institutions, the international institutions, this is a practice that Sun Tzu would have wrote about as well. We call it elite capture in the intelligence circles. So they capture our elites, they turn the state against the people will turn against the state, they pit all the ethnicities off one another, so we all get at each other's throats, we're not working together anymore, and the state will just implode on its own, and they don't have to fire a shot. And so the supranational institutions would be high value targets for the Chinese. So it's not just the WEF, it's the UN, it's the WHO, and the UN IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change in particular, where they're telling us that we need to destroy our economies because of all this carbon BS.
Oh, but they're fine.
They're
fine to keep doing
it. And they're fine. They can continue going. So they'll pull ahead of us economically, and they can just kind of dominate the globe, especially if they capture Taiwan. And that's 80% of the world's chip manufacturing, 80% of the world's cargo shipping goes through the Strait of Taiwan, and we'll be taking orders for them if that happens.
Well, I did hear from some insiders that do know all the technology to make chips, silicon wafer technology in Taiwan is gone. It's all been shipped out.
I don't think that's that simple. I mean, I worked in tech for 20 years, and it's never that simple.
Oh, this is what I've been hearing, that they've worked at pulling that stuff out. So even if they were to take Taiwan, and this is why they haven't been pushing so hard recently, is that they realized that
Joe Biden signed an order.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well,
Joe Biden signed an order, said they're going to reshore it, but I mean, it'll take decades probably. Okay, so the bottom line is, Klaus Schwab is the silent Jenner. They tend to be accommodating as leaders. It's the Darth Sidious figure, but the WEF I view as a proxy for China, and Xi Jinping is a boomer, as is Vladimir Putin.
It's interesting because talking to Andy Lee, the reporter Andy Lee, she does some fantastic work. And I got chatting with her when I was in Calgary the last time, and she was telling me about the WEF stuff that I had no idea about. She said, like, you see what they do in Davos every year, but you never hear about their other meeting every year. And since the 1970s, they have 2 meetings every year, and they have this televised one in Davos, and then they go to China 6 months later, and they have another one where there's no televising, there's none of that, it's all closed doors, and then it occurs there. And I was like, that just blew me away. Like, oh well, yeah, I guess that makes so much sense now.
Klaus Schwab refers to Xi Jinping as His Excellency. And he's been the keynote speaker there a couple of times too. Like they're pulling the strings of the WEF. I'd bet my next pension check on that.
His Excellency, wow! And that suit that he wears, like, what? You're not in Mortal Kombat, bro. You know, like, I don't know.
He's Dr. Evil.
It weirds me out, man. It weirds me out so bad. Like, why? Really? This is something you thought you could go walking out in public and people would think you're not Dr. Evil? What are you doing, man?
Yeah, I think they just embrace it. And he says things like, we're useless eaters and stuff like that. I think they just kind of embrace the evil. This is who we are. We're evil, and you guys can't do anything about it because we have all the wealth.
Unreal. Yeah, and we're looking at the biggest wealth transfer in human history right now because, well, when the boomer generation dies off, like this is an inevitability, there's inheritances, and all of that's going to be transferred to another generation. But it looks like in that whole process, there are a lot of people that are trying to get in there and infiltrate that money as it's going over, so it doesn't get transferred to the next of kin.
Yeah, I mean, and Bill Gates, I mean, he's basically Mr. Burns, and I don't think that he's going to do anything benevolent with his money. He's probably just going to put it in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and keep funding this tyranny from beyond the grave.
Oh wow!
I think that's what he'll go for.
So that's
for example, and
what we have to look forward to.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the good news is that he's not going to live forever. There's a generation coming up right behind them who's had enough of their shit. So,
right. And then that goes into, so we're going back to the first era of this.
First turning.
The first turning. Yeah. So the first turning is the aftermath after all this conflict. And we've been hearing about this from other people, expect a conflict coming. It's been compared to this new technology that's coming out, of AI and all this stuff and blockchain can be compared to the Gutenberg press, right? Where the Gutenberg press was this great thing that came about, and it changed the world when it came to literacy and all of these other things, and knowledge being passed down to people, and just your everyman being able to learn about stuff, and people getting away from the church and then being able to practice religion on their own, this kind of thing. It was a big powerhouse at the time. And now we're in a situation where, I mean, at the time then, they tried to lock it up. Apparently they tried to lock it up, and there was like 30 years of war before the Gutenberg press actually came out and got out to the public. And it seems like we're kind of going through this where they're trying to, as people come out with cryptocurrencies, their response to that is, no, don't use those. They're dangerous. Use ours. It's way better, and it tracks your every move and every purchase that you make, and we can tax every transaction. Isn't that fantastic? Yeah. And so it's like, either we're going to go completely centralized or we're going to go completely decentralized in this next move, or in the first turning. And well, who knows? Because I mean, obviously the big movers in historical times, Hitler, he was a big mover. He, as you said, was the nomad generation. Mao was a nomad generation, but they didn't end up the same. Hitler obviously lost. Mao didn't lose, and he tyrannizes people, and that ideology is still tyrannizing those people to this day. Where do you think we're gonna come out on this whole thing?
It may still be too early to tell, but according to the theory, there is during the fourth turning, there's a great coming together where everybody kind of realizes we've let our problems rot for too long, and there's a growing desire to surmount the crisis. And I think that happened with the trucker convoy, where everybody woke up, like we all came together, and it was the single best thing I've ever seen on Canadian soil while I was there.
Amen to that.
And yeah, and it basically woke up the world. We got follow-on convoys in Washington, Australia. We had the Trucker Rebellion in the Netherlands. So it seems like we've already gotten it that far, and the wheels are in motion. Like there are all these court cases now, like the judicial review with the federal court of the Emergencies Act invocation to make a real legal finding. And there are lawsuits going through. We're getting some favorable decisions in a lot of the different trials. Let's wait and see what happens with the Gov't boys. Apparently, there's this dramatic envelope that needs to be opened or may not be opened. But things we do seem to be getting, it's mixed results coming out of the courts because, again, the boomers are the judges. But we are getting some favorable decisions. So I think the wheels are in motion, and things are starting to turn again. But it's probably not going to be before 2026. That's for sure.
Well, in the Star Wars analogy, I see us as like the rebels in this whole thing, and hopefully we can find a solution like we did and defeat this empire that's forming.
And and the revolution, like one of the biblical examples that I would use would be David and Goliath. So David is the hero archetype coming of age, and he overthrows the prophet archetype in Goliath and establishes a new kingdom, higher standards of living than the world has ever seen. Yada yada yada.
Yeah, things were good under David. Eat Me on Twitter. These names are great. Eat Me on the super chats for $2 says, which turning would be the woke generation? What archetype would that be?
Well, I guess the woke, like the original wokesters, the original snowflakes are the boomer generation. Like they would have been the original summer of love with the campus riots back in the 70s. Black Panthers, third wave feminism. These are the factions that formed back then that remain dominant today. And now these are critical race theory and political correctness has run amok into wokeness. And the millennials take all this heat for being woke, but it's really more like the university educated millennials, because boomer females just using that university as an emotional tampon to soak up all her daddy issues, and inflicting this on the millennials. And so they come out like hating the West, like the boomers do, forever expecting them to man up like the rest of us and do their part to contain that commie Chinese dragon over there in Vietnam. And they've basically been in bed with the Chinese ever since, despite their great daddies. I mean, they're the white collar class that shut down manufacturing and sent it overseas to China, and they've been getting rich with them, like David Johnson opening up a bunch of, furthering his career at least, opening up a bunch of Confucius institutes and sending his kids to university in China. So they're extremely commie-philic with respect to the Chinese in particular. Yeah, and they seem to have adopted the propaganda of our adversaries, and they're teaching that in our universities now. And I'll use a case in point, just one example of the opium wars of the 1840s, which were really, the Anglo-China wars. Of the 1840s. And there's a great paper out there called The Opium War That Wasn't, and it's a Harvard paper. And basically what it says is it didn't have anything to do with opium. I mean, it did, but it was part of a cache of goods that a particular Chinese magistrate had seized. And what happened, he interned a bunch of the British citizens. He seized their goods, he seized the opium, and the British Navy wasn't allowed to dock their ships in the port. And so this got to be like a real crisis for the British citizens who were there. And so they had a parliamentary debate. They never mentioned opium. They declared war. There was no mention of opium in the declaration for war. They drove right up the arse of China, all the way up the river to Beijing, and made the emperor sign a treaty with no mention of opium in there anywhere. And that was the original treaty that established the British mandate in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong was a basically unoccupied island in China where the British were allowed to establish ports and an embassy. So if people got into trouble with the Chinese authorities, then they could come there, and it was a smashing success story. But the Chinese authorities never stopped being butthurt over it, and they made it sound like it's all about opium, when in fact opium was legal everywhere in the world up until 1940s America. I mean, Wyatt Earp's wife was famously addicted to laudanum, which is opium, and like poppies grow naturally in China, so you couldn't keep opium out of China if you tried. Right? They grow all over the Eurasian continent, from France to China. So
I still remember it was a Bayer company that introduced heroin, and it was for headaches. That's a thing. That's a thing.
I mean, it's effective.
It'll get rid of that headache. Yeah, it'll cause you all kinds of other troubles that maybe you didn't have before the headache. But maybe don't use it for headaches. I don't think many doctors are recommending that these days. But I want to thank you so much for coming out and telling this. This is a crazy concept that I'd never considered. And then to hear this being put together in such a concise way as a cyclical thing. And for all those that think you're boomer bashing, obviously some of the heroes in these stories are boomers as well. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, we have so many heroes.
Dr. Jordan Peterson, Dr. Robert Malone, there's a long roster here of Obi-Wan figures in the current fourth turning. But like I said, the problem is that they're in a very vanishingly small minority. That's what happens in the fourth turning.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, let's hope we get through it on the other side, more similar to how we were in the West than how China ended up through their last one. I think, that would be much better for us. And they're about to go through their fourth turning again as well, because they're ramping things up. And I hope everything for the best for the Chinese people too. I hope they turn things around and they see the benefits of free association, freedom, of economic freedom, all of these things. They're great ideas. We can all look to the past, read things from John Locke and Thomas Paine and all these great minds, and we can really, really establish a world community. I love to say world community because I don't think we should have a world authority. I think we should have a lot of individual states around the world that all communicate and trade and do all these things with each other on their own terms. And I think that would be the best way to run the world, just like you would run in your neighborhood. Nobody owns every house in the neighborhood. You own your own house, and you all have to associate with each other because you're neighbors, and you do it on your own terms. But everybody's got to work things out because it's for the best if everybody just works together. So I want to thank you again so much, Jeff, for joining me tonight and talking about this. And I want to thank everybody who's tuned in to the live stream. Where can you be seen if they want to catch you more stuff from you? I understand you do a daily podcast.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I do the Veterans for Freedom podcast every morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Monday to Friday, we do the podcast at 9 a.m. Eastern time. You can find us on Rumble, Veterans for Freedom, and also on Facebook. We get a lot of traffic on there. Twitter, we got a Veterans for Freedom Facebook group that you can join and subscribe and comment and all that stuff. And I haven't actually made money off it or anything like that yet. So, I'm out there. Yeah, exactly. I do a pretty solid 2 hours, 5 days a week at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So check us out on Rumble. That's where we're kind of driving everybody now because it's the censorship free platform. I hope you guys will tune in because I do this every day. I talk about all this stuff and just try to take everything that's going on and line it all up and put that generational lens over it every day. So,
it's no holding back.
It's growing.
As you said, if you're offended, you're going to hear more of it.
Yeah.
One
basically.
more super chat before we get out of here. Colette saying for $10, my favorite guest yet, thought-provoking conversation. Thank you, Jeff and
Thanks.
Clyde. Well, thank you guys for
you.
tuning in. One last thing.
Can I give one final thought?
Absolutely.
So I could sum up Strauss-Howe generational theory as follows. Strong men bring good times create weak men bring hard times create strong men. So the strong men who bring good times, that's the GI generation, ushering in the next era of the Enlightenment post World War II. Those good times create weak men. That's the boomer generation, indulged as children, and basically free houses by today's standards, and wages were much higher. They don't pay as well. The boomers don't pay us as well as they were paid, and so on and so forth. And then weak men create hard times. That's where we are right now. The boomers at peak institutional power. Hard times create strong men. That's the Gen Xers. We were raised as underprotected, with the latchkey kids and all that stuff. So the strong men who bring good times, they're coming up right behind it's a combination of the Gen Xers at peak institutional power with the millennials in their midlife power. So that's when the strong men bring the good times again. And I'm very confident that we are going to see good times again. It's just that, it's a war. It's not going to be won in a single battle. We need to think strategically and long term. So it's a matter of years, not days, weeks, or months. 2026 to 2030. That's what we're shooting for.
Interesting, because a lot of people will say the millennial gen and the Gen Zs are the weak men in this whole thing, but.
The thing about the prophet generational archetype is they never go to war when they're young. And so that's what we see with like George W. Bush, right? He's got too much to prove because his daddy was a great war veteran who was shot down. He was a pilot in World War II and he was a POW and all this stuff. And then he's just a little too cavalier with the lives of others, really pumping for that Iraq II war. And now there's nothing holding them back. There's no institutional power but them. They didn't go to war. They chickened out of Vietnam. So they don't appreciate, I think, they're a little out of touch with human suffering. But the millennials were in Afghanistan, and also we did a campaign in Iraq to destroy the so-called Islamic State as late as 2015, and they were there as well. So they are strong men. It's just the boomer generation that didn't man up when it was their turn. So I'm sick and tired of hearing everybody bag on the millennials. I was like, the boomers, you guys didn't do any of that stuff. The millennials are manning up. Okay, like lay off the millennials already.
Fair enough. The Leia and the Gen Zers. I mean, they're brought up in the world that they're given. That's really it.
Suffocated.
Yeah. So and suffocated, medicated. Anyway, thank you so much again for joining me, everybody. Thanks for joining the live stream, and well, we'll see you in the next one. Keep on trucking.
Thanks, Clyde. Appreciate it. Take care, everybody.